Chapter 106, 13 June Roman 3, Flight Plan. Flight plan for Tony Stark's private jet, filed Wednesday, June 13, 2012. International flight plan, header removed. 3 message type 7 aircraft identification, 8 flight rules type of flight. FPL N778 TSV G9 number type of aircraft wake turbulence cat. 10 equipment 01 GLF 6 MSB 13. Departure aerodrome timetable 12:00:15. Cruising speed level route 0531 Al 430 KTEB DCT DBABE Q406 BAF Q480 in Q8 22 Alexen 503B Ori Nats Gisti DCT Lando DCT Deval DCT Nippet DCT Magi DCT Blocker P600 Tunso Star Egg total Eat 16 Destination Aerodrome HR Min Alton. Chapter 107, 14 June, Interlude, Harley. Harley truly didn't know how she'd managed to get through her exams when she was worried about Voldemort showing up in the middle of class half the time. Would he do that? Who knew? And it wasn't just Voldemort. She had to deal with the stabbing pains in her forehead that still plagued her. They had continued off, and on ever since she met Voldemort in the Forbidden Forest. She hadn't hit her head. There was no bruise, and Voldemort hadn't come anywhere near touching her before Firenze drove him off. But something about that night must have had an effect on her, maybe some magical shenanigans, or maybe he was just that evil. Was that how it worked? She had no idea, but it wouldn't surprise her. Even worse, if it were possible, were the dreams. Harley hadn't got a full night's sleep all week since their detention, even when she tried. She kept being woken by her old nightmare. The green light, the high, cold laugh, and now there was a hooded figure there, dripping mingled red and silver blood down its robes. And of course, there was her worry about how her dad would react to Voldemort being back. Would he reject her because of it? She hadn't been mad enough to even hint at that in her letter, but he wasn't stupid, and even if he didn't reject her completely, she'd find it hard to blame him for wanting to keep her at arm's length. There was also the problem of communication. She hadn't realized, until after she'd sent her letter, that she hadn't asked if their plans for when school let out were still on. That was probably a good thing, she'd decided. That way, he'd either have Vito come and pick her up, or he'd have to send Hedwig back express. But it did mean she wasn't sure what to do with the custody forms. Harley still had the forms her dad had sent her with his last letter. Hermione had looked them over with her and agreed they probably did what he said they did, but Harley hadn't sent them to the Dursleys yet. If they signed the forms, and then her dad changed his mind, it would be a disaster. She decided she was going to wait until the 20th of the month to send them. That was just enough time for Hedwig to make a rush delivery back to her from New York, and her dad would know that too if he'd been keeping track. And if she didn't hear back from him then, she would have to assume that he was still coming, and that would be just enough time to get the forms to the Dursleys and back. In a strange way, Hogwarts had felt lonely for the past week. She was still hanging out with her friends, the same as always, but Ron and Hermione didn't, perhaps couldn't, share in her fears. The idea of Voldemort certainly scared them, but they didn't see him every night in their dreams. They either didn't or couldn't muster up the worry about the Philosopher's Stone that Harley did. If Hermione was losing sleep, it was only because she was so uptight about their exams, and Ron seemed much the same. The exams themselves, Harley thought, were of middling difficulty. They weren't easy by any means, but she found sweating through them in the sudden summer heat to be more difficult than actually writing the papers. She even thought she'd managed to not fail potions. Today, at last, it was time for their final examination, History of Magic. An hour of answering questions about famous witches and wizards, and some not-so-famous ones. Did anyone care who invented the self-stirring cauldron? And they were done, free for a whole week of relaxing until their exam results came out. Harley and Ron led Hermione out to the grounds, trying to ignore her continued talk about their exam papers, where they sat in the shade of a large beech tree by the edge of the Black Lake. Harley leaned against the trunk and tried to soothe the pain in her forehead as she watched the Weasley twins and Lee Jordan tickling the tentacles of the giant squid. But they had only just got settled when they were snapped out of their musings by a sharp-rack. Holly's jaw dropped as she looked over just in time to see a familiar black and white owl swoop down towards her and land right by her side. "Hedwig!" she gasped, feeling a strange sense of déjà vu. Hedwig had never delivered a letter from her dad at any time other than at breakfast. True, she'd come in later than the rest of the post when she delivered his note after the battle in New York. And Charlie's reply to Ron's letter by school owl had come at night, so she knew it was possible, but she wasn't expecting it, and she certainly wasn't expecting it today. "Wow, she came out here right to you," Ron said. "That's some good service. But I don't understand. She's never come to me after lunch before," Holly said, "and I'm not expecting her back yet." "Maybe," Hermione started, then she looked around to make sure they weren't being overheard. "Maybe your dad told her to make another rush delivery," she said more quietly. "But that's impossible. It's only been 8 days. It shouldn't be possible to make the round trip that fast, even at her top speed. And look, she's not tired out like last time." "Well, see what the letter says," Ron said reasonably. Holly shrugged and removed the mail tube from Hedwig's back, but when she actually read the letter, she felt the blood drain from her face, and she nearly dropped the paper. "Holly!" "What's wrong?" Hermione said worriedly. "It's my dad," she said softly. "He's in Edinburgh." Ron and Hermione were immediately alert. Ron sat up from where he'd lain down in the grass. "Edinburgh," Hermione squeaked. "How? Why?" Ron added. He flew on an aeroplane with Hedwig. He sent her from Edinburgh so she could get here faster, and oh no, she groaned. "What?" they both asked. "He wants to know how to get into Hogwarts." "What?" the both said louder. "He says," she continued reading hurriedly. "He says he wants me to ask a teacher how a muggle parent can get into Hogwarts and not to take no for an answer." "I don't know if he can," said Hermione. "My parents asked McGonagall about it when she delivered my letter, and she didn't exactly avoid the question, but she said that muggles were only brought to Hogwarts in case of emergencies, and everything else would be by owl post. But McGonagall never talked to my dad," said Holly. "And I don't think Dad's gonna back down so easily." "What's the big deal anyway?" asked Ron. "You're gonna see him in a week after we go back to London, aren't you? He's worried about me." "You see, in my last letter he sort of told him about Voldemort." Holly winced as her friends started shouting, and Hermione jumped to her feet. "What? Are you mad? You really did it. Why would tell him?" "I had to do it, don't you see?" Holly shouted back, jumping to her feet. Then she stopped as she saw Fred, George, and Lee were staring at them. Ron was standing by now too, so she lowered her voice and leaned closer to both of them. "If Voldemort comes back and comes after me, he needs to know," she hissed. "I don't want him to get caught by surprise." "Why didn't you just wait till the end of term?" Ron protested. "Well, I thought about it, but what if Snape steals the stone before then?" "I didn't think he'd come and try to kick in the door." At that, Hermione gave a sad sigh and said, "Oh, Holly." "What?" she said. "If you'd actually grown up with your parents with Anites and Guardians, you'd understand." "Come on," Hermione led her, and ran away from the tree and farther from any prying ears so they could speak more freely. "What should I tell him?" Holly asked worriedly as they walked. "Don't tell him anything," Ron insisted. "Let him wait till the end of term." "No offense, but it wouldn't be good to have a muggle who doesn't know what's going on wandering around here. He's going to want an answer, though. So, just tell him there's no way for a muggle to get in." "I don't want to lie to him. Besides, he knows where the leaky cauldron is. If I don't give him an answer, he might start hanging around there and asking random people for help, and that would be worse. He's mentioned it before." "I think this is above our level, Holly," Hermione told her. "You should tell Professor McGonagall that you told your dad about Voldemort." "But then we'd have to tell her about Voldemort," she protested. "We've still got no proof. She won't believe us." She looked at her letter again. "Yeah, Dad agrees with me on this one. He says I shouldn't mention Voldemort when I ask the teachers because we don't know who we can trust." She thought for a minute. Maybe I can ask Hagrid. He knows about Dad, and he knows something was in the forest. He might at least hear us out." Suddenly, Hermione stood still, her eyes wide. "Or Madame Pomfrey," she said. "Madame Pomfrey," Harley and Ron said at the same time. "She's the only other person you've told about your dad, right? And she told us she keeps things confidential. If no one's in danger," Harley finished. "We can't tell her about Voldemort either, but maybe we can ask her about how a muggle can get to the school." Hesitantly at first, but then gaining speed, she started back up the path to the castle, headed for the hospital wing, her friends following close behind. Chapter 108, 14 June Roman 2, Letter from Anthony Stark. Letter delivered to Harley Potter at Hogwarts, Thursday, 14 June 2012, afternoon. Dear Harley, I should have done this a long time ago. I could give you a lot of excuses why I didn't. Busy, worried about your privacy, wanted to get the paperwork done first, whatever. That's not the point. It was a mistake not to do this sooner. I'm in Edinburgh right now. That's how Hedwig got back to you so fast. I brought her in the plane, and it's been far too long in coming. I could have flown out here months ago so we could talk faster, and I'm sorry I didn't. That's on me. Now, I want to know what the hell is going on at your school that I got a letter like that yesterday. But that's not the most important thing. The important thing is I want to know how to get into your school myself. Because after seeing what you're going through, I'm not trusting any of your teachers while I have the choice. I'm coming out there in person. What I want you to do now is go to a teacher and tell them about Snape, the Philosopher's Stone, Voldemort, or any of it. If you don't think you can trust them, it's better to keep it quiet. Instead, just ask them how can a muggle parent get into Hogwarts. You can tell them about me if you haven't already. Or if you think that would overcomplicate things, just make up some story about your aunt and uncle. Or say you're curious about what happens in emergencies. But ask them how I can get in, and don't take no for an answer. I've got some other leads, but that's by far the easiest, and if anyone gives you trouble for it, they can tell it home. Okay, I tried to write this out on the plane, so I'd have to time to clean it up some. I can tell your letter wasn't easy for you to write, especially with all the things you skipped over before, so thank you for trusting me enough to tell me all of that. And I'm sorry you had to go through that. Facing the man who killed your parents is something you should never have to do, but especially not at your age. Look, I'm not mad at you for getting caught after curfew, especially if it really was for a good cause. Kids make mistakes, and I did worse than breaking curfew when I was younger than you are. It's a rite of passage for kids, especially boarding school kids like us. I'm just glad you got out of that situation without getting hurt. I have a lot of questions about how you got into that situation in the first place, but I'm not going to take it out on you when there are alleged responsible adults I can interrogate. And I'm not mad at you for hiding all that stuff from me either. I know all this is new to you, the same as it is to me, and most of it probably seemed like isolated incidents or things that weren't worth worrying about at the time. The part about Snape putting a curse on your broom is a problem, though. Now, based on what you told me, if he didn't try it again, and if you're right that your teammates would have caught you, then I agree it was more likely retaliation for finding out about what he was up to. In fact, if I force myself to think about it rationally, and if your teammates would have caught you, then he might have only been trying to hurt or scare you and not kill you. Don't get me wrong, I still want to shoot him for what he did, and working for Voldemort is a whole other level of bad. But if I can talk to the other teachers myself, I should be able to take care of it that way. Either way, something needs to be done about him. I let it go before because I thought he was just a jerk teacher. Everyone has jerk teachers, and sometimes you can do something about them, but a lot of the time you just have to put up with them. But this is different. You probably don't need to be told this, but you need to stay away from Snape. Definitely don't be in a room alone with him. Preferably don't go anywhere alone at all, and just generally avoid him as much as possible until I get there. I suppose it's too much to ask if Hogwarts has any actual procedure for this kind of problem. When you told me about your school, you never mentioned having a guidance counselor. Since the place seems kind of medieval, you might not have one. But you said you had a healer, Madame Pomfrey, so she's probably the next best thing. Now, this is for future reference because right now, figuring out how I can get in is more important. But normally, if a teacher is threatening you, here's what you should do. Go to Professor McGonagall, Madame Pomfrey, and or your guidance counselor if you have one, or better yet all three. Tell them you're afraid of Snape, or any other teacher who threatens you, and you're afraid he'll retaliate if he finds out you're talking about him. In a non-magic school, that alone would get you a lot of mileage. Tell them everything you know. Give them any evidence you have, even if it's circumstantial, and ask if they can do anything. If you don't trust the teachers, if it looks like some kind of good old boys club in the school, and they won't respect your privacy, that's when you need to talk to someone higher up. And ideally, in the Muggle world, you document everything so you can send it to the school board, the police, and or the press. It's a whole thing. But I don't know enough about Hogwarts and the magical world to know the best way to go about it there. So for today, we'll skip that part. Just tell me how I can get in there, and I'll Macketham listen. The hard way if I have to. I'll be there soon. Stay safe. Love, Dad. Chapter 109. 14 June Roman 3. Letter from Harley Potter. Letter delivered to Tony Stark in Edinburgh, Thursday, 14 June 2012, evening. Carried loose and not in a mail tube. Dear Dad, I couldn't believe it when I saw Hedwig come back this fast. And I can't believe I didn't think of sending Hedwig a shorter distance so we could talk faster. Although, to be honest, I wasn't expecting you to make the trip a bunch of times or for a long time to do that. I'm sure you're very busy, and we were getting by well enough. But please, this isn't the sort of problem you can solve by shooting it. It's not just a bad teacher. Voldemort is an evil wizard who knows all kinds of dark magic, and no one could stop him when he was in power, and he didn't even die when he got blown up or whatever happened to him. And Snape isn't much better. Everyone says he knows all about the dark arts. I'm going to stay away from him. I would have done that anyway. We just got done with exams this morning, so I won't have to see him, and there's only a week left in the term anyway. I did ask Madame Pomfrey about how a Muggle parent can get into the school. She's the only other person I've told about you besides Hagrid, Hermione, and Ron. I haven't been trying to hide it or anything. I just didn't want to worry about how people would react, especially about my mum. But Madame Pomfrey says there's not really an easy way for you to get here in the time we have left in the term. And it's worse for you because you haven't been, officially, introduced to the magical world. The normal way would be to send a letter to the Muggle Liaison Office at the Ministry of Magic, explain the situation, and tell them you want to visit the school. But that could take several days to process, and with only a week left, there's not much point. And please don't try asking around the leaky cauldron either. Madame Pomfrey agrees with me that it's dangerous if you run into someone who thinks you're not supposed to know about magic, or who just doesn't like Muggles. She says the next best option is if you tell me where you're staying, I can ask Professor McGonagall to go to you and officially introduce you. That's how Hermione found out about magic. McGonagall brought a Hogwarts letter to her in person, but she might want to wait until term is over too. Oh, and Madame Pomfrey says if there's a medical emergency, she'd send the student to St. Mungo's Hospital and tell the parents to go there. And honestly, there's only a week left, and I can keep away from Snape. I know you want to help, and it's great that you came out to Scotland early for me. But with this little time left, it'll be easier to just meet at King's Cross next week like we planned. Love, Harley. Chapter 110. 14 June Roman 4. Phone call from Tony to Fury. Telephone logs from SHIELD headquarters. Incoming call from Tony Stark, alias Iron Man, to Director Nick Fury. Access restricted. Thursday, June 14, 2012, 1:09 p.m. EDT. Addendum. Level 10 clearance restriction added. Fury, Mr. Stark. Something must be wrong if you're calling me direct. How bad is it? Stark, For you, it's not. I need a favor. Fury. Pause. And you called me. You must really be desperate. What happened? Stark. My daughter told me one of her teachers tried to kill her. I need you to call up your buddies in Ward and ask them how fast they can get me into Hogwarts. Fury. Into Hogwarts. Pause. Did your daughter tell you that electronics don't work around magic? Stark. Yes, and that's why I built extra redundancies into the Mark Roman 8 to deal with an unexpected loss of power. I'm ready for it. Fury. And your arc reactor. Stark. Thought of that too. If it loses power, which I'm hoping it won't, I'm packing a neodymium magnet that I can stick on top of it. Fury. Pause. A permanent magnet. Pause. No, if you could do that, you would have done it when you were dying. Stark. It's a temporary fix. Doesn't have the same depth and precision. But I have to take the chance. It should work long enough to get me out of there if it goes wrong. Fury should. To himself, whispering, "This is such a bad idea," to Stark. What about her other teachers? Stark, don't believe her. Fury, your other wizard contacts. Stark, don't have any yet. I've got a couple other leads, but I don't know who I can trust right now. This isn't the only weird thing happening in Holly's life. Fury, a sigh. I told you we compartmentalize, Stark. I don't have a lot of influence in Ward, and there's their statute of secrecy to consider. Do you have Professor Holly's father at least? Stark, of course I do. I have a DNA test and a magic test from a bank, however that works. Fury, pause. I can talk to them, but even coming from me, it's not gonna happen today. If you tell me where you are, I might be able to convince them to send someone to you tomorrow. But knowing you, you probably already have a plan B to track down her school tonight. Stark. Actually, your Eplan B following Holly's owl back to her school is plan C. Fury, of course it is. A sigh. Look, I know how important family is. I'm not gonna stop you, so good luck. Also, if you don't come back alive, it will eminent domain everything. Stark. Hey, if you're willing to face Pepper's wrath when you tell it to her face, knock yourself out. Fury. Stark. Call disconnected. Chapter 111. 14 June v. Letter from Holly Potter unsent. Letter written by Holly Potter on the evening of Thursday, 14 June 2012, not sent. Dear Dad, I'm writing this in case something happens to me tonight. If you have to read this, I'm so sorry. I swear I tried everything I could think of, but nothing worked. I don't have time to explain everything, but we think Snape is going to steal the Philosopher's Stone tonight to give to Voldemort. We found out he knows how to get past all the enchantments, and Dumbledore's not in the castle to protect it. I found all this out after I sent Hedwig to you, so I couldn't tell you earlier. We tried to tell the other teachers, but no one believes us, and they said they'd expel us if we kept poking around. And we think Snape might be on to us too, so it's dangerous to try anyone else. The only thing left that I can do is to go through the trapdoor and steal the stone first. I know how to get past Fluffy, and we think that was the hardest part. I don't know if I can do it, but I have to try. If Snape gets the stone, Voldemort's coming back, and I'll be the first one he'll come for. And I'm not looking to fight Snape. I just want to get there before him. But if Snape shows up and tries to kill me again, or if Voldemort's with him or something, you deserve to know what happened. I don't think Voldemort or any of his followers know about you, so go just home, and he'll probably leave you alone. I'm sorry. I love you. Harley, P.S. It's not your fault. There's nothing you could have done. It's too hard for Muggles to get to Hogwarts, and even if you did, you wouldn't be able to do anything against a wizard who knows lots of dark magic. Chapter 112. 14 June Roman 6. Note from Anthony Stark. Note sent by Anthony Stark to Hogwarts, Thursday, 14 June 2012, late evening, scribbled hurriedly on the back of Harley's previous letter, also included a miniaturized radio tracking beacon. I'll be the judge of what problems I can fix by shooting them. Thank you. Chapter 113. 14 June Roman 7. Logs of the Mark Roman 8 Armor. Logs of the Mark Roman 8 Iron Man Armor, Thursday, June 14, 2012. Remote backup on Mr. Stark's private server. Mr. Stark had attached a radio beacon around Hedwig's neck and released her with a reply message to Miss Potter at 6:18 p.m. local time. He followed her in the Mark Roman 8 at distances ranging from 500 to 2,500 meters, 0.3 to 1.5 miles, reaching an unexpectedly far distance north in the Scottish Highlands. Tracking the radio beacon proceeded normally for 3 hours and 21 minutes before unusual electromagnetic effects began to manifest. At this point in the recording, Hedwig is at a range of 1,800 meters, 1.1 miles. Jarvis, sir, I am detecting increasing electromagnetic interference from the beacon, along with what appears to be geometric distortion. The location data is rapidly losing precision. Mr. Stark, that must mean we're getting close then. Let's start closing the distance. Try not to lose her. The Mark Roman 8 accelerates towards Hedwig. However, the interference and data errors increase exponentially, as does camera jitter. The uncertainty in Hedwig's projected flight path remains constant despite approaching closer to both her and her destination. After 20 seconds, Mr. Stark notices this and accelerates more aggressively. After a further 11 seconds, telemetry indicates that Hedwig is at a range of approximately 700 meters, but with a large uncertainty. In that moment, a loud burst of static sounds over the radio from Hedwig's beacon. Alert, radio tracking lost. Alert, optical tracking lost. Warning, jamming field projected at 680 meters. Mr. Stark. Oh. Transcriber's note. Warnings were logged at intervals of 1 second during this incident. Warning, jamming field projected at 570 meters. Warning, jamming field projected at 460 meters. Warning, jamming field projected at 340 meters. Warning, jamming field projected at 240 meters. Warning, jamming field projected at 160 meters. Warning, jamming field projected at 110 meters. Warning, jamming field projected at 90 meters. Warning, jamming field projected at 140 meters. Warning cancelled. Transcriber's note. Upon seeing the alert, Mr. Stark accelerated diagonally backwards and away from his flight path at high thrust. This was just enough for the Mark Roman 8 to narrowly miss what was projected to be a magical technology jamming field. After this, the Mark Roman 8 slows to a stop over a period of 12 seconds, stopping at a distance of approximately 700 meters, 0.4 miles away from the edge of the field. Based on inertial navigation, Mr. Stark, phew, Jarvis, what was that? Jarvis, analyzing, sir. Pause. After making several assumptions based on Miss Potter's descriptions, I believe it most likely that Hedwig passed inside the unplottable, magical distortion field that surrounds Hogwarts School and the village of Hogsmeade. The field seems to block all radio communications in addition to making it impossible to navigate with traditional cartography. Mr. Stark. And I can't see Hedwig either. Anything on zoom lens? Jarvis. Negative, sir. Mr. Stark. Play back last available recording of her. A 5-second recording plays of the period before tracking of Hedwig was lost. The recording is digitally stabilized, as Hedwig's position appeared to show intense camera jitter in the raw footage, despite the jitter not appearing in the background scenery. In the stabilized recording, Hedwig appears to be flying normally, but the camera shows a distortion effect around her similar to heat shimmer. The distortion increases rapidly, causing Hedwig's image to blur and then vanish at the moment contact was lost. Mr. Stark. Whoa. If I didn't know that was magical camouflage, that would be really unsettling. Jarvis. Based on the telemetry, I would hypothesize that the unplottable field has some capability to adapt to the type of technology that attempts to penetrate it. Mr. Stark. Well, that makes it a bit harder. Size of the field. Jarvis. I estimate 1 mile in external diameter. However, based on Miss Potter's description, it is likely bigger on the inside. Mr. Stark, where's the man in the blue box when you need him? Question passed as rhetorical. Can you project the location of the center of the field and take us toward it? Jarvis. Negative, sir. Mr. Stark. surprised. You can't. Why not? Jarvis, the interference with technology appears to extend beyond the borders of the field itself. There is some indication that the dimensional effects do as well. Inertial, optical, and satellite navigation are currently displaced over 100 meters from each other, and I cannot reconcile the difference to fix our position. Mr. Stark. Pause. Jay, are you saying we're lost? Jarvis, we are not lost, sir. However, we do not know our position accurately enough to proceed to Hogwarts. Mr. Stark, they really take their secrecy seriously, don't they? Question passed as rhetorical. Kay, think. There's gotta be some other way to find the place. Pause. We could wait and see if Holly sends Hedwig back out, but she might not do it tonight. It's getting late. Mr. Stark is silent for 2 minutes and 32 seconds. During this time, he toggles between several settings and readouts on the HUD. None of them provide identifiable insights into the unplottable field. Mr. Stark, frustrated. This is getting nowhere. Did Holly say anything else useful? Pause. Pull up that postcard she sent me. The HUD displays a high-resolution still capture of Miss Potter's postcard featuring Hogwarts Castle. Mr. Stark examines it for 17 seconds. Mr. Stark, the river. Harley said Hogwarts is built on top of a river. Jarvis, based on the angle of the sun in the photo and the local terrain, it appears most likely to be flowing into the lake from a roughly northeasterly direction. Mr. Stark, then we can circle around and follow it in wait, with all the mountains around here, it could start inside the field well the water's got a float off the lake, doesn't it? Plot a course between the jamming field and the ocean. When we find the river, that'll be our in. A course is plotted on the HUD, and the mark Roman 8 descends to just above the forest canopy. Mr. Stark, we're lucky Harley's school is this far north, with the late sunsets. This would be a lot harder at night. Transcriber's note. On this night in this location, sunset was at 10:28 p.m. local time, leaving 41 minutes before sunset at this point. Mr. Stark. Oh, and switch over to near-infrared filter. Scan for running water. Transcriber's note. At near-infrared wavelengths, trees appear much brighter than invisible light, while water appears much darker, thus increasing the contrast of any bodies of water in the forest. Despite this, the dense forest canopy made the search very difficult, forcing Mr. Stark to fly at little more than a walking speed. At one point, Mr. Stark attempted to search from below the canopy layer, but the difficulty of dodging around tree trunks and branches made that method no faster. However, the search was shortened by scanning only the low-lying areas of the valleys where water could flow. The search lasted 34 minutes, nearly reaching the point where Mr. Stark would have been forced to continue at ground level by the encroaching darkness. Mr. Stark, got it. Finally. The HUD displays an infrared image of a patch of forest. A dark band is visible on the ground through the gaps in the trees. The mark Roman 8 descends through the canopy. Once below the trees, the image resolves, confirming that it is indeed a river. Mr. Stark switches the HUD back to visual mode. Jarvis, an impressive feat of visual navigation, sir. The current conditions are quite challenging. Mr. Stark, yeah, no kidding. The only question is this the right one, or is there another river around here? Do you have our general location well enough to check? Jarvis, yes, sir. Pause. There appears to be only one westward flowing river in this area of Scotland, large enough to drain a lake the size of the one in the photo. Assuming the river flows all the way from Hogwarts to the ocean, this will be the one. I also recommend that we proceed at ground level from here. The river should afford us enough space to navigate. Mr. Stark. Yeah, and we definitely don't want to lose it. Pause. God, it's dark in this forest. You'd think the sun already set an hour ago down here. Mr. Stark switches the HUD over to night vision mode. Mr. Stark. All right, let's go. The mark Roman 8 turns to face upriver and accelerates forward, reaching an easy running speed. Jarvis, you are prepared to abort on short notice should your equipment fail, sir. Mr. Stark, we already went over this, Jarvis. Things start flickering, I slow down. The suit fails, I use the manual rockets to push out of the field. If the arc reactor fails and doesn't restart, I slap the magnet over top of it before I keel over. I've got this. Jarvis, very well, sir. If this doesn't go as planned, may I say, the best of luck to you. Mr. Stark. Thanks. Hopefully, I won't need it. The Mark Roman 8 proceeds forward for approximately 500 meters before interference rises to a level that interferes with the suit's sensors. At that point, Mr. Stark slows his flight to a walking speed. He proceeds for a further 200 meters until most sensors other than simple audio-visual cease, returning usable data, and the flight stabilization subroutines begin to show unstable oscillations. He then lands the Mark Roman 8 on the bank of the river. Mr. Stark, all right, let's take easy from here. How are the comms? Jarvis, my connection to the server is intermittent. Queries that cannot be performed locally will be delayed under current conditions, and normal voice communications will be nearly impossible. The conditions are also likely to worsen further. Mr. Stark, we'll have to make do then. We've got to be getting close by now. Mr. Stark continues following the river with the Mark Roman 8 on foot, proceeding slowly on the uneven terrain. After a further 100 meters, rapidly compounding alerts in the communication system are logged. Jarvis, sir, the interference levels are spiking. Based on the profile, I believe we may be approaching the field-bound, signal lost. Chapter 114, 15 June, The Philosopher's Stone. Harley Potter was understandably nervous. Her plan to steal the Philosopher's Stone before Snape did was, after all, quite mad, and if she were calm enough to think it through properly, she would realize that a bunch of firsties trying to break through protective enchantments that were intended to be more secure than Gringotts, where the security system would straight up kill you, and that had stymied a competent adult wizard for a year, was a ludicrous idea. If she were calm enough to think it through, she would realize that Professor McGonagall had been right when she said, "I suppose you think you're harder to get past than a pack of enchantments." Granted, at the time, they had only been trying to act as lookouts, and even now they were only trying to stop Snape by getting out in front of him, but it was the same principle. But Holly wasn't calm enough to think things through right now. If Snape gets the Philosopher's Stone, Voldemort's coming back, and he's going to kill me first, was a powerful motivator, and her friends weren't exactly in a position to calm her down either. Ron Weasley, with plenty of loyalty, but a 12-year-old's naivety, was set on going with her, and Hermione Granger, to an objective observer, was supremely overconfident, thinking she might be able to find information about advanced protective enchantments in her first-year class notes. They had to wait for the common room to empty after dinner. It was the first time Harley was glad no one wanted to talk to her. The sun had set well before everyone else had gone to bed, and sunset was very late this time of year, and it was then that it was finally time to go back up to her dorm for her invisibility cloak. The dorm was dark when she entered, with only a little twilight visible through the windows. Lavender, Parvati, and Faye were already asleep. As quietly as she could, Holly pulled her cloak out of her trunk and draped it over her arm. Then her eyes fell on the hand-carved flute Hagrid had sent her for Christmas. She pocketed it before she closed her trunk. Playing a flute for Fluffy seemed like a better bet than singing. She was just about to leave the dorm when she was startled by Softprick from behind her. She jumped and just barely stopped herself from crying out. Turning around, she saw what she had missed coming in. There was just enough light to see a pale, striped shape standing on her desk. Hedwig had come back. "Hedwig," she whispered as she approached. "What are you doing?" Hedwig tapped her foot on the desk and let out another crack. As quiet as it was, it sounded like glass shattering in the silent dorm. "SHH," she whispered urgently. "You'll wake the other girls." But she had got the message. She slid the letter at Hedwig's feet toward her on the desk. Then she drew her wand, and careful to keep her body between the light and the beds, whispered, "Lumos." And then when she looked down, she was surprised to see it was the same letter she'd sent out earlier that day, except no, there was something scribbled on the back. I'll be the judge of what problems I can fix by shooting them. Thank you. Harley sighed and shook her head. Must be because he's American, she thought, but she picked up the letter anyway. At the same time, in the dim light, she saw that Hedwig was now wearing some kind of collar or necklace. It looked like it might be electronic, but if it was certainly dead now, and she didn't have time to think about it. Then, just before she left, another wild thought struck her, and she grabbed the other letter she had written tonight, the one that wasn't to be sent out unless something went badly wrong. She didn't want Hedwig to get any ideas about delivering it now, no matter how unlikely that seemed on its face. That one's for later, she explained to her. Knox, pocketing both letters, she hurried back down the stairs. When she reunited with Ron and Hermione, she told them, "We'd better put the cloak on here and make sure it covers all three of yous if Filch spots one of our feet wandering along on its own." "What are you doing?" a voice called, and they jumped as they saw Neville Longbottom rise from a chair that had had its back to them. "Nothing, Neville, nothing," said Harley, hurriedly putting the cloak behind her back. Neville stared at their guilty faces. "You're going out again," he said. "No, no, no," said Hermione. "No, we're not. Why don't you go to bed, Neville?" Harley looked at the grandfather clock by the door. They couldn't afford to waste any more time. Snape might even now be playing Fluffy to sleep. "You can't go out," said Neville. "You'll be caught again. Gryffindor will be in even more trouble." "You don't understand," said Harley. "This is important." But Neville was clearly steeling himself to do something desperate. "I won't let you do it," he said, hurrying to stand in front of the portrait hole. I'll fight you." "Neville," Ron exploded, "get away from that hole and don't be an idiot." "Don't you call me an idiot," said Neville. "I don't think you should be breaking any more rules, and you were the one who told me to stand up to people." "Yes, but not to us," said Ron in exasperation. "Neville, you don't know what you're doing." He took a step forward and Neville raised his fists. "Go on then, try and hit me," he said. "I'm ready." Harley looked between him, Ron, and Hermione, but then she got an idea of her own. It sounded mad, but somehow she thought it might be exactly what they needed. She stepped forward in front of Ron, approaching Neville cautiously. She didn't think he would hit a girl, at least if she didn't hit him first. Dudley wouldn't hit a girl, if only because of the number of times he'd been told off for it in primary. Sure enough, Neville's fists started to unclench, and he looked unsure of himself. Then she reached out, laid on hand atop his right fist, and gently pushed it down, while she pulled her letter out of her pocket with her other hand. "Neville, please, this is important," she said in what she hoped was a soothing voice. "You see this letter?" She held up the envelope for him. "If I die tonight, I need you to send it for me. Hedwig knows where to take it. You just need to give it to her." Neville's arms went slack. "Wah, wah, what?" he said, backing up slightly. If yowdy." "Harley, what are you talking about?" Luckily, she heard Ron moving behind her, slipping around to the portrait hole. "I wish we could explain it to you, but there's no time. But this is a lot bigger than you know. Please, can you look after this letter for me?" She tucked the envelope into the breast pocket of Neville's teddy bear pajamas. "Oh, okay, I guess I can," but he stammered. "Thank you, Neville," she said, and she gave him what she hoped would be an encouraging smile. "If we're lucky, I'll be back in the morning, and we can forget all about this." It was only then that Neville noticed that Ron had pulled Hermione out through the portrait hole, and Harley quickly followed. His eyes widened as she left. "Wait!" "Harley!" he shouted after her, but she jumped out and shut the portrait behind her before he could reach her. "Phew, I wasn't sure if that would work," she said. "Now hurry, in case he follows us." She shook out her invisibility cloak and draped it across her shoulders. Then she grabbed Hermione and Ron and pulled them close to her on either side, under the cloak's folds. Ron was reeling from what he'd seen. "Harley, that was brilliant," he whispered. "How'd you think of a lie like that?" Harley went very still. With an effort, she flipped the cloak's hood up over their heads, but she didn't speak. "Harley," Hermione whispered, "that wasn't a lie, was it?" "No," she whispered back. "It wasn't." "What?" said Ron, clearly taken aback. Hermione seemed just as surprised. You really wrote your dad a letter in case, Yowdy? She asked. I thought he deserved to know what happened if it goes wrong, she said. I mean, who knows if we'll run into Voldemort down there or something. She felt the shudder run through Ron as he pressed against her. Do you really think we might run into him? He said. I told you didn't have to come with me. Don't be daft. Of course we're coming with you, he insisted. Well then, come on. We need to move. They hurried off down the corridor. The cloak did seem to cover all three of them, even if they had to huddle uncomfortably close. They quickly shifted so that Ron, as the tallest, was in the back, under the middle of the hood. Really, it shouldn't be that hard. The cloak had covered Harley and Hermione with Norbert already, but they needed to be sure. Yet the hem cloak seemed to sweep the floor perfectly with the three of them under it. Harley's cloak had always been a bit difficult to work with. Not only did it flow like liquid silver, so that it was hard to be certain of your grip on it, but she'd found its shape never quite appeared the same depending on how you looked at it. The hood, for example, she could swear it like a normal cloak's hood that only shaded her eyes, and like the hood of a muggle ghost costume that draped down to her chest at the same time. But whatever magic was in it, it was mostly working. They successfully avoided misses. Norris at the foot of the first set of stairs. They took the little-used back way to the third floor, hoping they would be less likely to run into anyone, but unfortunately they still stumbled upon Peeves at the stairs down to the third floor itself. He knew they were there, even if misses. Norris hadn't, but he was scared off when Ron, in a feat of vocal mimicry Harley had never heard from him before, spoke up in a hoarse whisper. Peeves. The bloody Baron has his own reasons for being invisible. With only one corridor left before they reached the door to Fluffy's room, they thought they were home free. But that hope was dashed when they heard footsteps, clunking footsteps coming from the far end of the corridor. They froze. What is that? Harley whispered. It's not the real bloody Baron, is it? Ron asked nervously. He doesn't walk, Ron, Hermione chided. Is it Snape? Harley asked. Is Ithagrid, you mean, stomping around like that? Ron countered. Maybe he's coming to feed Fluffy, but it wasn't Hagrid or Snape. It wasn't Neonthe expected. A moment later, a figure came around the corner that should have been impassable at Hogwarts. It looked like Arabat shaped like a man, but made all of metal. Two glowing blue eyes were set in a flat face. A larger blue light glowed in the middle of the chest, and the light reflecting off the walls was just enough to make out a red and gold paint job as it stomped up the corridor. It can't, Hermione whispered. Is that her man? Harley asked. Who? That muggle guy, said Ron. It looks like it, but that's impossible, Hermione said. How could his suit work here? It seemed surreal, like two worlds colliding that were never meant to come together. But most unfortunately, Iron Man must have heard them, for his gaze fixed on them. He strode directly toward them, and a bright flashlight lit up on his mask and swept over the corridor where they stood. Then he raised one arm. A yellow light glowed in the palm, and there was an electronic whine, like some kind of device charging up. An electronically modulated voice called out from behind the mask, authoritative and demanding. All right, I know you're there. Some kind of invisibility magic. Show yourselves. If you're students, I need to know. I won't tell your teachers. Hermione and Harley, both realizing that disobeying was a bad idea, moved to take the cloak off, but Ron gripped their arms hard. No, don't, he hissed. It's okay. He's good, Hermione said. He helped fight the aliens. They pulled the cloak off, and Iron Man lowered his hand. The electronic whine dropped in pitch and faded away. And then he said in a surprisingly cheerful voice, Oh, that was easy, although I have to wonder why you're wandering around after curfew again. Easy, Harley said. Again, Ron said. Please, sir, Hermione spoke up. Did Professor Dumbledore send you? Dumbledore, said Iron Man. No. I'm here for Harley, obviously. For Harley, Hermione and Ron said at once. Form, Harley repeated. But why? Why? He said in surprise. What my daughter told me one of her teachers tried tackle her, his face plate opened. What did you think he was gonna do? Harley gasped when she saw the face under the mask. Dad. Dad, Ron and Hermione said entirely too loud, turning to face her. That face her father's face shifted from angry to confused all at once. Yao Yao didn't know, he said. He's your dad, Ron said. Well, yes, Harley said. But I don't understand. Harley Potter, Hermione said seriously. Are you telling me your father Istony Stark? But he's not. At Gringotts, they said his name was, and then the penny dropped. What it should have done a whole year ago if she'd been looking for it. Anthony shortens Tartany, doesn't it? Yao didn't know he was Iron Man, her dad repeated. Well, no, I didn't, she said, suddenly feeling very foolish. All those times she'd imagined finally meeting her dad, she never would have come up with this. How in the he stopped and took a deep breath. Harley, he said, you didn't know I was Iron Man, even though you had my name, my date of birth, and my address. And no computer to look it up on, she said. My photo. Well, Roman too didn't get to watch the news a lot at home. I didn't know what Iron Man looked like under the armor. I told you about it in my letters. You did, she said in confusion. Her dad made an exasperated sound and shook his head. Jarvis, back me up here, he demanded. The three of them jumped when a very cultured-sounding British voice sounded softly from the suit. Sir, none of your letters to Miss Potter directly referenced your work as Iron Man. Harley stared. That's Jarvis, she said. Indeed, Miss Potter. It is a pleasure to meet you. Likewise. Okay, look, her dad said, starting to sound cross. We told you I wanted to go flying together. I thought you meant an aeroplane, she said, or paraglider. I thought you just had weird rich people's hobbies. His mouth hung open, momentarily speechless. The suit was surprisingly silent when he was standing still, only casting an eerie flickering light on the corridor. But soon he collected himself and said, well, it's good to know you inherited my sass. But also, excuse me, Iron Man is the weird rich people's hobby. Harley, Hermione spoke up again seriously. You knew your dad was rich and had a lot of tech and a computer assistant, and was named Anthony Stark, and you didn't think that Hemite Iron Man. Harley spun to face her, throwing up her hands. Well, Stark isn't such an uncommon name, she protested. There must be lots of blokes named Anthony Stark out there. Her dad brought it back in. Okay, at this point, I think we both need help learning to communicate. Oi, Ron cut in, and all three of them stopped to look at him. I dunno what's going on here, but we need to get out of the corridor. Filch could show up any minute. Filch, her dad said. Harley shook her head. The only place we can go here is Fluffy's room. Fluffy, the dog. You told him about Fluffy, Hermione in surprise. Yes, the dog, Harley replied, but we know how to get past him now. Hagrid says you just have to play him some music and he goes to sleep, and I've got a flute. She pulled Hagrid's flute out of her pocket. And I've got a stereo system, her dad said. All right, if you're sure it'll work, I'll take it. I wanted to see this Fluffy anyway. Harley looked urgently to Hermione, and Hermione hurried over to Fluffy's door. She tapped her wand to the lock and said, Alohomora. The latch clicked loudly in the darkened corridor. Damn, I wish I was recording that, her dad grumbled. All right, let's see. His face plate flipped back down, the blue eyes flickering on again, and he walked up to Fluffy's door and opened it, and immediately closed it again. He looked back at Harley, speaking in his modulated voice. You said it was a dog, not an elephant. It is a dog, Hermione insisted. Yeah, we've heard the barking, Ron agreed, wincing at the memory. I told you he was a giant, Harley added. I thought you meant giant like a bear, not giant, could have its own monster movie. The music will still work, she said. Can you play it, please? There was an audible sigh from the suit. Jarvis, do you have Brahms' lullaby on file? Playing Brahms's symphony now. 2, the cultured British voice said, immediately followed by the sound of soothing orchestral winds. Better hurry in case someone hears, Ron said, crowding in behind Iron Man's suit. Iron Man opened the door and stepped inside, closely followed by the three children. Harley would never in a million years have imagined this was how they would be getting past Fluffy, but it was certainly better than her original plan. By the time they were all inside, and the door shut behind them, the dog's eyes were already drooping at the music, its growls subsiding to snorts, and it tottered on its paws. Moments later, it lay down, seemingly asleep. Unfortunately, it had lain down with one of its massive paws on top of the trapdoor. "Can you move its paw?" Ron asked. The suit's face plate opened again. "Right, trapdoor," he said. He planted one foot and pushed with the other, almost like one would nudge a normal-sized dog with a toe to get it to move, and the paw slid aside effortlessly. He turned back to face the three of them, and he pointed at Hermione. "All right, you're a Hermione Granger," he said. "I found your picture online, and you," he pointed at Ron. "Based on Harley's letters, I'm guessing you're Ronald Weasley." "Am I, sir?" Ron said in surprise. "Did I tell you their full names?" Harley said in surprise. He shook his head. "Not many families have 7 kids, and not many kids have 2 dentists for parents. You told me enough to narrow it down." "But, Mr. Stark," Hermione interrupted. "Is your armor supposed to be doing that?" She was pointing in the flickering light, and when Harley looked, she saw she was pointing at the blue light that was flickering in the suit's chest. Her dad looked down with a concerned expression. No, it's not supposed to do that," he said. "Jarvis, diagnostic." "Sir, the arc reactor is responding to an uneven power draw from the Mark Roman 8, Jarvis said. His voice was glitching slightly in time with the flickers, too. "The systems are experiencing gun-documented interference. Output on the arc reactor. It appears to be remaining safely above idle levels. Cannot confirm with my usual precision, but the inductance in the system should be sufficient to cover the gaps. It looked like it started when you opened your helmet, Mr. Stark," Hermione offered. "Confirmed, sir," said Jarvis. "I recommend you keep the face plate closed should combat arise." "Honestly, I'm surprised your armor works at all at Hogwarts," said Hermione. "Muggle electronics usually don't." "How did you do it? You ever hear of a Faraday cage, kid?" "Of course, but it might not block out magic. In fact, I'd more expect it not to." "Well, it's clearly not perfect. That's a lot of interference for just the faceplate, but it works. But as I was saying before, the more important question is, why are the 3 of you breaking curfew again?" And suddenly, Harley was fully focused on the reason they'd come here in the first place. "Snape," she hissed. "Snape's going to steal the Philosopher's Stone tonight." "Harley," Ron said, suddenly nervous. "I think he's already been here." He was pointing at the floor. She followed the direction and saw something gold and glittering. "It's a harp," said Hermione in horror. "He must have already gone through the trapdoor." "Snape," Harley's dad interrupted. "The one who's working for Voldemort." He pronounced it with a final t, she noted distantly, but she wasn't worried about that just now. "You told him about that too," Ron said in shock. "Yes, that's Snape," Harley answered her dad. "We found out this afternoon he knew how to get past Fluffer. It was after I wrote you. And Dumbledore's out of the castle," Hermione added helpfully. "He'll think the way is clear." "Yeah, and none of the other teachers believe us," Ron spoke up. "Snape already wants to expel us. He probably knows we're on to him," Harley added. "Wait, slow down," her dad interrupted. "You think Snape is down there," he pointed at the trapdoor. "And he's going to steal the Philosopher's Stone to bring Voldemort back to life." "Yes," all 3 of them said at once. "And what are you doing here?" he demanded. Under his gaze, Harley looked down at her feet, suddenly feeling very foolish. "Well, we wanted to stop Snape from stealing the Philosopher's Stone for Voldemort be going down there and stealing it first." She looked up at him sharply. "And we're only doing it because nothing else worked," she said quickly. "McGonagall doesn't believe anyone could get through the protections. Hagrid doesn't believe Snape would do anything bad. Dumbledore's not here. And Snape knows we're on to him, so he's watching for us sneaking around anywhere else." Okay, he interrupted, holding up a hand. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. "Let me get this straight. Your plan is for 3 6th graders to stop a grown man who probably knows more magic than all of you put together from stealing the priceless magical artifact." We're first years," Ron said. I was in year 6 last year, Harley protested. Not the point, he said. Did Yorila think you could fight Snape for it? I was hoping we could get there before him, she said lamely, which isn't an option now. I justy thought there wasn't anything else we could do. No one else would help us. You said your headmaster was out of the castle. Could you call him back? Maybe send Hedwig to him. Harley, Ron, and Hermione all looked at each other in horror. Her dad sighed and turned away, looking around the room while rubbing the bridge of his nose with his gauntlet. Right, because you're 11, he said. You're right, Dad, Harley admitted quietly, looking at her feet again. We should have tried to write to Dumbledore. We can't fight Snape ourselves. Her dad looked at them sympathetically for a minute, but then he smirked. Well, I can, he said. Almost as if on cue, the music still playing from his suit swelled as it reached a more upbeat part of the song, although the volume seemed to adjust down in proportion. Then he grasped the ring and effortlessly lifted the trapdoor. The 3 children grinned and rushed forward, peering over the edge of the hole in the floor, but there was only blackness below. Can't see much, he said. Jarvis, flare. A flap opened on the suit's shoulder, and a bowl of red fire shot out of it and into the hole. It fell down, 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 a surprisingly long way, illuminating the floor below, which seemed to be covered with a writing mass, but the mass recoiled when the flare hit it. Well, I hope you weren't planning on jumping that, he said. What is that? Said Ron. I don't know, but it better not be a tentacle monster. Some kind offblint, Harley offered. Oh, it's Devil's Snare, Hermione said excitedly. All 3 of them looked up at her. Professor Sprout told us about it. It's a magical plant, Mr. Stark. It can grow in complete darkness and, well, it'll strangle you if you touch it, but fire repels it, though. Ah, well, fire's easy enough, he said. Just landing on it will do it. Okay, he added with finality. I'll go take care of Snape for you and we can help, Ron cut in. You can help be sending a letter to Dumbledore and then going back to bed. This is a job for professionals. Harley bit her lip and looked at her friends nervously. Even accounting for her dad being Iron Man, this wasn't how she'd expected this to go. She could tell Ron felt the same, and even Hermione looked conflicted. Excuse me, Mr. Stark, Hermione said nervously. It might be better if Wedded help you. No, he said. It's just that we know about magic, sir. We may not be able to fight, but we know a lot more about magic. Harley can't have told you that much in her letters yet. No offense, Harley. Right, you wouldn't have known about the Devil's Snare without Hermione, Ron chimed in. I wouldn't have any dead to know about it, he said. My repulsors would have fried it. But what if you run into something else, said Hermione. Some other enchantment that's resistant to fire or something that causes more problems with your armor. You do realize I'm a superhero, right? He insisted. I can handle the unexpected. It's kind of my job. What I don't want is having to also protect 3 kids tagging along while I do it. I've got my invisibility cloak, Harley offered quickly. Snape doesn't know about it. Only Hermione and Ron do. He won't know we're there. Yeah, that's not how this works. Why not? Ron demanded. Because you're 11. I'm 12, he protested. He ignored him, but just then Jarvis spoke up again. Siri, I'm obliged to recommend Thathelp would be preferable if it is available from within the school. Harley's dad startled with a betrayed expression. Jarvis, whose side are you on here? He protested. While you have substantial override privileges, my priorities remain hard-coded to place the highest weight on your personal safety. Sir, if you wish to transfer that to Miss Potter, for example, I will need to either reconnect with my main server or do deep edits to effectuate it. He only grumbled in response. If the Mark VI's power supply experiences increased fluctuations, you said the power supply is fine. It's the connection with the suit, isn't it? We have already experienced one complete power failure when crossing in Hogwarts' magical environment, sir, and it came right back on. That was in response to passive magic. Sir, we still do not know how your suit or your arc reactor will react to spells actively cast on them. in the event of another failure, while an extra pair of hands would be invaluable. So you don't need our help, Ron said, a little too eagerly. I don't need help, Holly's dad answered. I could use some help, but from a responsible adult, not kids. We should leave and track down one of your other teachers. We can't do that, Holly gasped. What if Snape comes back up while we're gone? He groaned. Then I'll stand guard while you three get a teacher. They looked at each other uncomfortably. I don't know if we can, sir, said Hermione. We don't know where any of their rooms are. Yeah, we'll probably just run into Filch, and Hedda Finatelli won't listen, said Ron. Just voice thys Filch, Harley's dad interrupted. He's the caretaker, Harley told him. He's awful, Ron added. He hates us, like all of us. He'd love to find an excuse to chuck out more students. Yeah, and McGonagall's not much better right now, Harley agreed. She's still angry about when we got caught after curfew the last time. Hermione flinched. Wait, you told him about last time. Harley turned back to her. I told Heimverithing, she exclaimed. Her eyes widened in horror. You told him about the Quidditch match. Yes. About the troll, Ron said worriedly. Yes. About Norbert, said Hermione. Harley froze. Iri told Himmel most everything. Norbert, her dad asked. He was the reason we got caught last time. Long story. But he's in Romania now. Right, he said skeptically. But if you're worried about being expelled, I'll vouch for you. Your school won't cross Maeve. They know what's good for them. Harley bit her lip, trying to imagine what would happen if the three of them went wandering the corridors looking for a teacher, or if just she, Harley, did while Hermione sent a letter to Dumbledore. They'd probably be caught by Filch before finding Gandalf the teacher's apartments. He would drag them, presumably, to McGonagall, and McGonagall would be even angrier than before. Would she believe they had tried to meddle with the Philosopher's Stone again? Probably yes. Would she believe Harley's father was Iron Man and was waiting in Fluffy's room for reinforcements? It seemed impossible. Would she even let them tell their story before Shelley didn't even know? Magic them back into bed and lock the door? Put them on the train to London in the middle of the night? Let Filch use his whips and chains, call the auras on the juvenile delinquents? I don't know, Harley said. It could still really go wrong, and you said we should be careful about who we trust. Her dad sighed. Sometimes you don't have any choice but to trust somebody to help, he said. Okay, let's try getting more information. This is a stupid question, but do you know if Voldemort went down there with Snape? I don't know, but I thought he might have, she answered. HMC, if it was just Snape, I could just stand guard here and wait for him to come back. He looked back down the hall where the flare was still burning. This is weird. It looks like the whole room down there is filled with that stuff. You said a bunch of your teachers are helping to protect the Philosopher's Stone. The dog is Hagrid, and you think the plant is Professor Sprout, she nodded. Yes. And then there's McGonagall, Flitwick, Quirrell, and Dumbledore Snape, unfortunately. He looked for a few moments longer and said, Is this gonna be a DD dungeon with one protection in each room? D&D, Harley said. Is that Dungeons and Dragons? Hermione was a step ahead of her. It wouldn't surprise me, Mr. Stark, especially if the protections are large and complex. And she hesitated, searching his face. I'd think we could help you figure out how to get past them. He shook his head. I'll take my chances doing it my way, he said. The only reason I need help at all is, if something goes wrong with your suit, Jarvis said. Harley said. Indeed, Miss Potter, Jarvis answered. In the event of an arc reactor failure, the emergency measures will be easier to apply by a third party. Jarvis, can it? Her dad said sharply. Harley, that's not your job. Daddy know a teacher would be better, but we don't know how much of a head start Snape has, she told him. It could take all night to convince a teacher to believe us about you, and I don't know if they'll understand what to do. They never use Muggle technology. I've met people at Hogwarts who couldn't even pronounce the electricity. It's true, Hermione agreed. Please, Dad, Harley tried, looking up at him with wide eyes. I only just now got to meet you. I don't want you to get hurt because you ran into something magical that broke your suit. Hogwarts is already enough that just having your helmet open is causing problems. I'm worried about what'll happen if it gets hit with a spell or how it'll react to the other protections. Her dad just stared at her. After a few moments, he said, "Are you seriously giving me puppy dog eyes right now?" Holly's eyebrows rose fractionally in surprise, inadvertently enhancing the effect. Puppy dog eyes had never done her a whit of good with the Dursleys in her life. She wasn't sure she could do it deliberately if she tried. Her dad was unmoved. That face might get you a lot, but it's not going to get you into a fight with an evil wizard. "We don't have to fight," she said quickly. "We'll have my invisibility cloak. Snape will never know we're there, please. I just want to make sure nothing happens to you if it goes wrong." She sniffled involuntarily. "That's still not your job, Holly," he said more gently. "I'm Earded, you might remember." Hermione and Ron both looked between the two of them uncomfortably. "We could hang back," Hermione said hesitantly. "You're definitely loads better at fighting than we are. I do think someone should be close enough to help you if there's an emergency." He stared at her some more, looking conflicted. He tapped the blue light on his chest sharply, as if trying to make it work properly. But then he sighed heavily and muttered, "I can't believe I'm even asking this," under his breath. "Jarvis, if Holly helped with the emergency measures like you want, do you have any advice on how it could be remotely safe enough?" Jarvis, unsurprisingly, came through. "I would suggest a second-line position, sir," he said. "In the Mark Roman 8, you would be well suited to scout ahead if the space below is divided into discrete chambers. As appears to be the case, Miss Potter will have cover in the event of an arc reactor. Failure, the emergency rockets could push you out of the danger zone to where Miss Potter would be able to help." "That could work?" Harley asked uncertainly. He dad thought another minute, then sighed again. If this damn thing would work properly, he tapped the arc reactor again. "You're lucky I haven't learned how to be a responsible parent yet," he said. He fixed all three of them with a sharp look. "All right, first of all, I can only carry one of you safely. You two," he pointed at Ron and Hermione, "are going back to bed regardless. Understood?" Ron opened his mouth to protest, but Hermione elbowed him in the ribs. "Yes, sir," she said. Second, he pointed to Holly. "You stay behind me, keep your invisibility cloak on, and keep quiet until we know it's safe." "I heard you two easily out in the hall," Harley nodded. "And if itis like a DD dungeon, you wait behind me in the next room while I scope things out." She nodded again. "Third, if I think it's getting too dangerous, I'm bringing you back up. No arguments. I'm guessing Snape doesn't have any other way out of here." They shook their heads. "Yeah, you're here to help me if something happens to my suit and to be my guide to magic stuff. If it comes to actual fighting, I don't want you in the room, and I'm getting you to safety first if I need to." She nodded again. "And fourth," he continued, "listen close, because this is the only reason I'm even considering this." He lifted his right leg in front of his left and flipped some kind of catch, causing a flap in the heel to open. He pulled out what looked like a block from inside the flap, about the size of a deck of cards, and wrapped in a cloth pouch. "This is a big-ass neodymium magnet," he said. "Don't bring it near anything metal." Harley and Ron both started and pointedly looked his suit up and down, although Hermione seemed to understand. "Gold titanium alloy, not magnetic," he said, tapping his helmet with his other hand. "Don't bring it near anything with iron or nickel. If you're not careful with a magnet this size, you can lose a finger, but it looks like there's not much metal around here to worry about. The important thing is, if this light goes out," he tapped the flickering blue light on his chest, "you need to pull that magnet out and slap it over top of it." "Got it, okay," Holly said. She had no idea what that was about or how it would help with the magical interference, but she could do it. She wasn't carrying anything metal. She took the magnet and pocketed it. Her dad took a deep breath. "All right, you two should go," he told Ron and Hermione. "If you get in any trouble, I'll vouch for you later." "Hermione, Hedwig's in our dorm," Harley added. "You can send a letter to Dumbledore from there." Hermione nodded, but her lip trembled, and she suddenly dashed at Holly and threw her arms around her. "Oh, Harley, be careful," she cried and hugged her. "It'll be fine, Hermione," she said quietly. "His plan's way better than mine was, and Ron, if we get in trouble, I'll make a distraction, yeah," he said with an awkward grin. "Our Yauserai will be all right." Harley forced a smile. "I just found out my dad is the world's greatest superhero," she said. "What could go wrong?" Ron and Hermione both gave her weak smiles in return, and then they carefully opened the door, checked to see if the coast was clear, and slipped out of the room. Harley turned back to her dad. "World's greatest superhero, huh?" he said with a hint of a smile. "Good to know I have your vote. I'll be expecting #1 superhero dad on a coffee mug." She wasn't sure if he was joking or not. "Now, let's see that invisibility cloak," he said. Harley gave him a small smile as she pulled the cloak onto her shoulders and flipped the hood over her head. The Iron Man suit's face plate slid back into place, the blue light glowing steadier once again, and a flashlight swept over the place where she was standing. "That is amazing," he said. "There's no distortion, no refraction, no light emission." He walked in a circle around her. "And it works from every angle. Shield has tech that can go invisible in one direction, but not like this Loki could do it. But I didn't see it up close." Suddenly, the implications of her dad being Iron Man hit home. "Merlin's beard. You actually fought Loki himself," she said faintly. "Did you really just swear by Merlin?" he said in return. The pause stretched between them, broken only by the continuing music. "Okay, that's actually kinda cool. But yeah," he said uncomfortably, coming back around to her front. "I can tell you all about it, but this isn't the time, Aim. You still show up on thermal. That's pretty much impossible to avoid, but the sensors are so bad in here that I'll need my lab to make better sense of it. Jarvis, what about sonar?" "Inconclusive, sir," the computer voice replied. "As you say, the sensors are far from 100%, but it appears that Miss Potter's cloak may also have sound dampening properties. Well, if you keep quiet, you should be good. Where do you get these things anyway? Can you buy them at Magic Nordstrom?" "No, they're supposed to be really rare. Apparently it belonged to my stepdad." "Ha, I might want to have a talk about that later, but right now, it's just what we need." He looked back at the trapdoor. "All right," he took a deep breath. "Climb on my back and hold on. If you can handle a 12-foot troll, my suit should be easy." He crouched down, and Harley easily lifted herself up with her hands on his shoulders and one foot on the back of the knee joint. Pushing up farther, she held on with her arms around his neck. The suit wobbled as he stood up straighter again. "Ah, suit doesn't like carrying something it can't see," he said to himself. "But it's good enough." The suit jolted under her grip as he stepped forward over the open pit, and the rocket boots or whatever they were fired up at the same time. He stepped off completely into open space and lowered them through the trapdoor. Chapter 115, 15 June, The Philosopher's Stone, Caunt. The suit lowered down through what seemed to be a shaft cut into the rock. The music cut off as soon as they were clear of the trapdoor. The shaft went far down, well below where the ground floor or even the dungeons would be if normal geometry applied. The Iron Man suit was quieter than Harley expected on the way down, not a blast like a rocket launch. It did sound like a rocket, but just hovering, it was quiet enough to hear her dad speak over it. "You know, Pepper signed me up for parenting classes," he commented. "Online, you know. But there's not exactly a class for I want to help you fight a wizard terrorist, and I've got some actual good reasons why you should let me." Harley wasn't sure how to respond to that. Slowly, they touched down on a circle of bare stone, the devil's snare still being held at bay by the now sputtering flare. Harley slid down off the suit's back and set her feet on the floor. The room was small, though large by the standards of a place where the entire floor was covering by writhing vines, and looking around, the only exit was a darkened passageway that sloped down away from them. Harley was reminded of Gringotts. With an unpleasant jolt, she remembered the dragons said to be guarding vaults in the wizard's bank. Although now that she thought about it, the alien monsters her dad had fought were bigger and meaner than that. Her dad turned in place and swept an arm around the room, the light in his palm glowing white. When he seemingly found nothing, the face plate opened. What was below that room on the second floor? He asked in a whisper. Normal classrooms, I think, she whispered back. The castle doesn't always make sense. How deep are we? Jarvis didn't whisper, but he lowered his voice enough to match. Inertial navigation places us approximately 50 feet below the lake's surface, but it has already proved unreliable tonight. So Snape must have had a way to get down here, since he's not splattered all over the floor, her dad said. Harley made a face, but of course he couldn't see it. Could he have brought a broomstick down here? He could have, if he knew he needed one, she agreed. All right, let's keep going. He turned to the dark corridor leading down out of the room. He raised his hand again, and this time a blast of light and heat shot out of it. It exploded on the vines lying across the exit with a thunderous sound, blasting a hole through them, and Harley jumped and let out a loud squeak. The burnt ends of the vines recalled back to the main mass of the plant. Stay behind me, but keep out of reach of those things, he said. Harley nodded, though again he couldn't see it. He walked forward into the passage. It looked like a bare tunnel, lit only by his flashlight. But she heard a faint rustling and clinking coming from up ahead. It sounded like wings. There was a flickering of torchlight ahead. Her dad held up a hand and motioned for her to stay put while he walked forward. The passage opened into another chamber larger, from what she could tell. He walked inside and surveyed the room, this time looking up as well as around. No one here, he concluded, and there's a door this time. The place is full of birds, though. Harley tiptoed forward and poked her head through the doorway. Birds, she said. She could see now that on the far side of the chamber was a very heavy wooden door. And overhead, there were indeed hundreds of jewel-bright birds, fluttering and tumbling all around the high-ceilinged room and making the air itself seem to shimmer in the torchlight. Yeah, there, he said, but he trailed off, still looking up. No, Nartharekis. Keys, she said. Harley squinted at the flock, and amid the dancing points of light, she could see a rather Nazi the rounded bodies of the birds, but instead, her seeker's eyes told her they were thin and metallic, just right to fit an antique lock. That's odd, she said. Professor Flitwick must have enchanted them to fly. Do you reckon one fits the door? Sounds more like a bluff, he answered. You don't put the key in the same room as the door it unlocks. Can you use your magic on it like Hermione did? Harley crossed the room to the door, pulled out her wand, tapped it against the lock, and said, Alohomora. Nothing happened. It's either enchanted against it, or I haven't learnt that spell properly, she told him. Her dad walked towards the door. Plan B, then, he said, and raised his arm. Harley scurried out of the way just in time before a blast of energy hit the lock with a loud bang. But unlike with the vines, when the smoke cleared, the lock was still intact. Ha, he said. Lasers, then. I would advise restraint with the lasers, sir, Jarvis chimed in. They are very power-intensive, and in an enclosed space, even diffuse reflection could be hazardous. Harley looked around the room more carefully. Maybe there's some other way to get through, she said. And then she saw it, resting against the wall. Look, a broomstick. She rushed over and flipped off her hood, opening her cloak so her dad could see her, and she picked it up off the wall to show him. Snape must have left it behind. Maybe the real key's in here after all. That doesn't make any sense, he protested. Well, maybe we can see it, she said. She set the broom down and went back to look over the door again, thinking through the problem. It'll probably be a big and old-fashioned key and probably silver, like the handle. Can you shine a light up there and see if there are any that look like that? She wasn't sure he believed her, but he turned his flashlight upward, sweeping it over the keys. They looked almost dazzling in the brighter light, but she could still see some details. Jarvis was faster, though. After only a couple sweeps of the room, he said, I have found a likely match, Miss Potter. The searchlight narrowed to a smaller spot and began following one particular patch of the swarm. In the middle of it was a large, silver key with bright blue wings and its feathers conspicuously crumpled on one side. as if it had already been caught and stuffed into the keyhole. "Son of a bitch," her dad said, and then looked back down sharply at her. "If Pepper asks, you didn't hear that," he said. "But why would Snape leave the key in here? Why not just take it with him?" Harley shrugged. "Well, he wasn't expecting to be followed, was he?" He opened his faceplate and shook his head. "No, something's off about this whole thing. You run into Cerberus, and you play Orpheus in the underworld. Little shop of horrors, and you can kill it with fire. Now there's a locked door, and you just have to chase down the key in the same room." She shrugged again, albeit less certainly this time. "Well, if it works," she said. He said, "Well, I guess it can't hurt to try." Harley was about to go back for the broom again, but before she could say anything, her dad closed his faceplate and took off. Harley winced and covered her ears as the rocket boot's roar echoed off the walls of the stone chamber, a good deal more loudly than just hovering. So much for being subtle, she thought, although she supposed they'd had the same problem with the Devil's Snare Room. Worse, the moment he took off, the keys swarmed faster, circling the room at high speeds. The Iron Man suit followed, but he was struggling, kicking one leg out to make the tight turns, and the spotlight had trouble staying on the correct key. He got close, but it kept dodging just out of his reach. The bent wing didn't seem to slow it down at all. It darted and dived so fast that he could never quite reach it. The suit made flailing catches, first with one arm and then the other, each time either leaning over at a bizarre angle or practically rolling over in midair and having to throw out an arm to steady himself. Harley winced again, this time from embarrassment. That had to be the clumsiest flying she'd ever seen, with the possible exception of Neville's. Her dad certainly wasn't going to be winning any Quidditch awards any time soon. As she watched, she realized that the glowing discs on his palms, in addition to being weapons, also seemed to be stabilizing his flight. He couldn't fly without using both hands to maneuver like she could on a broom, at least not in such a tight space. He still gave it his all, but after several minutes of trying and failing, he landed again and opened his faceplate. He actually looked out of breath. Meanwhile, the keys resumed their more leisurely flight. "Dad," Harley said, slightly aghast. "What was that?" "You were flying like a yes," he pushed her. "I was gonna say a dodo, but he snorted, but then shook his head again. "This suit isn't designed for confined spaces like this," he said. "I can hover. I can navigate a city. I can fly supersonic. But I can't do tight turns in a room this size without bouncing off the walls." Harley looked at him sympathetically. It really was a full flying. But then she smirked. "Well, I can," she said. She draped her invisibility cloak over her arm and held it out to him, and he grabbed it with an uncertain expression. Then she walked back towards where Snape's broom rested against the wall. With a flourish, she held out her hand without looking and said, "Up!" The broom jumped into her hand, and her dad's eyes widened. "Just keep the spotlight on the key," she said, and she mounted the broom and kicked off. The keys swarmed again, but Harley was ready. She kept her head down and leaned into the swarm so that when they pelted against her body, it wasn't much worse than a heavy rain. She kept her eyes fixed on the key with the bent wing. Luckily, it was a lot easier for the spotlight to track it from the ground. It still darted around so fast that it was nearly impossible to catch. But not for nothing was Harley the youngest seeker in a century, and unlike on the Quidditch pitch, the key had nowhere to run. With a spotlight on it, it was almost too easy. After only a minute or two of weaving through the swirl of rainbow feathers, she snatched it out of the air and came back down for a landing. When Harley had her feet on the ground again, she held up the key for her father to see, its wings still struggling in her grip, and she gave him a satisfied grin with a small tilt of her head. Her dad was wide-eyed. "My God, it's like looking in a mirror," he said. The smile dropped off her face. "What? Yow, you have your mother's face, and yow might have your stepfather's hair. But that I'm the best attitude. That's all meaned I suddenly understand why Pepper thinks it's so scary." When she still looked uncertain, he smiled slightly himself and said, "That was amazing," in an encouraging tone. "Now, let's see if that key really works." Harley rushed to the door and stuffed the key in the lock. Sure enough, it turned and the door swung open. Unbelievable, her dad said resignedly. Hold on to the key just in case. She started to put the key in her pocket, opposite the magnet, but the moment she tried, it suddenly burned red-hot in her hand. Youch, she hissed. She let it go instantly, and it took off with a strength it hadn't shown before, and Room rejoined the swarm. Never mind then, her dad said. You okay? It's fine, she said, shaking out her hand. Good, put your cloak back on, he added quickly. She did, and he motioned her to the side. Then he closed his helmet and stepped through the door. The chamber beyond was dark, but as he stepped inside, torches flared to life and revealed an astonishing sight. Just beyond the entrance was a huge chessboard. He was standing behind the black chessmen, which were all as tall as he was, or even taller, and carved from black stone. Facing him from across the chamber were the white pieces, faceless and somehow all the more menacing for it. A chessboard, he said. As Harley watched, he walked between the pieces and crossed the board. I assume this is just an aesthetic for an army of guards. Just before he reached the white pieces, the pawns drew two long, wicked-looking curved swords each and held them out in a crossed pattern. Unlike the stone of the chessmen themselves, the swords were made of shining steel. Her dad stopped and back up a couple steps. Then, after pausing for a minute, he walked off the left edge of the board and tried to go around them. But the moment he did, the leftmost white pawn thrust a sword out in his path, and two spears shot out of the windows of the king's side castle, longer than what should have fit in the piece itself, and embedded themselves in the wall. Very Indiana Jones, he said. Then he took off into the air, but the moment he did, Alaf, the white pieces raised swords into the air like a forest of blades, reaching up to what Harley now saw was a curiously low ceiling. Her dad landed again and surveyed the scene. Harley, seeing the coast was clear, stepped inside the room. Her dad looked back at her when she pulled her cloak off again. He walked back towards her. 16-1, he said seriously. 32 if the black pieces join in. I can fight my way through them, but you should stay on the other side of the door while I do it. Maybe we should try to play our way across first, she suggested. That isn't how security systems work, he insisted. Besides, the pieces are already moving on their own. It's a wizard's chess set. They're supposed to do that, she said. Wizard's chess. How is that different from regular chess? The rules are the same, but you call out your moves and the pieces move on their own. And if there's a capture, the pieces bash each other and drag the captured piece off the board. She looked at the room again. Professor McGonagall must have done this, she said. She transfigured the stone into giant chessmen, and then she enchanted them to make them alive well, no to live, but so they could play on their own. Her dad shook his head again. Harley, I'm telling you, that's not how any real security system works. You use a password or a combination lock. Or a key that you keep in your pocket, not something anyone who's good at chess can get through. Well, it can't hurt to try, can it? She insisted. She walked over to one of the black knights and laid her hand on the horse's flank. The stone immediately sprang to life. The horse pawing at the ground, and the knight turned its head to look at her. She heard motors whining behind her as her dad was no doubt prepared to respond if she was attacked, but the knight only looked at her expectantly. Do we have to join you to get across? She asked. The Black Knight nodded. Harley turned back to her dad. I don't suppose you're a chess genius in addition to a superhero, she asked nervously. Ron's a lot better than I am. Don't need to be, he answered. This still doesn't make sense, but Jarvis, do you have a chess program on file? Not state-of-the-art, sir, but with some adjustments, the engine from the Chess Titans game should be able to defeat any non-professional human player. Well, this is still ridiculous, but I guess if it works, it'll be better than trying to fight through them. He surveyed the board again, then pointed at the Black King. Hey, Aragorn, step aside for us, he ordered. Harley was pretty sure that wasn't a move Wizard's chess would respond to, but perhaps because he'd pointed to the specific piece, the Black King turned around and stepped off the board. Harley, Take the king square, her dad said. And Jarvis, what's the least likely piece to be captured? Analyzingi do not have a database of chess games in local storage for confirmation. However, a preliminary analysis with the engine suggests the h7 pawn. A pawn? You want me to be a pawn? Oh, fine, whatever. He pointed to the pawn at the far left and said, You too, I'll take that spot. The black pawn stepped aside, and her dad joined the board in its place. A few moments later, the white piece's e-pawn moved forward 2 squares. Her dad was silent for a minute, but Harley guessed he was consulting with Jarvis in the suit because eventually she heard Jarvis's voice call out, Pawn to c5. The chess game actually gave them a bit of a reprieve from the stress of pursuing Snape to the Philosopher's Stone. Evidently, even a computer needed a couple minutes to think about each move to ensure it was playing as well as possible, meaning they finally had time to talk. On his main server, Jarvis could do this instantly, he explained, but even I have a limit to how much I can fit in a suit. Harley nodded as Jarvis called out his next move. So I have to ask, her dad said, opening his face plate between moves. You really didn't know what Iron Man looked like without the armor. She shook her head, and he paused and thought before he continued. How did you pull that off? I mean, looking back, there were clues in your letter, Salatov, clues. Now I think about it. There were a lot of things I was surprised you didn't mention. But I never would have thought Yao didn't know because I didn't think anyone with an internet connection could go that long without knowing. Harley shook her head. Aunt Petunia only let me use the internet for school, she said. And I told you I didn't get to watch the news much. She always wanted me to help make dinner. Plus, Uncle Vernon doesn't pay much attention to foreign news, and old Dinky de Diddums cares about his woo. He flies fast and blows stuff up. She waved her hands beside her head in imitation of an overexcited child. He chuckled at that. Is that what you call your cousin? No, that's what Aunt Petunia calls him, she said. I call him Duffer de Middums. He laughed again. You are a me daughter, he said. She laughed with him, but it was short-lived. Growing more serious, he turned, looked her in the eyes. Harley, I want you to tell me the truth, he said. Did they hit you? No, she said without hesitation. Well, Dudley did when we were little, but the teachers put a stop to it when we started school. He didn't look happy about that. Did they feed you properly? He asked. She shrugged. They fed me enough. That was clearly the wrong thing to say. His voice tinged with anger as he demanded, and what is that supposed to mean? It means they fed me enough, she said indignantly. It's not like I was starving before Hogwarts. And besides, I'd rather end up looking like Aunt Petunia than Dudley. Have you seen him? At her defiant gaze, her dad broke off first. He made a scoffing sound that might have been a laugh and said, Yeah, I've seen his picture. That kid's one golden ticket away from getting stuck in a chocolate pipe. Harley couldn't help it. She cracked up giggling, and her dad smiled in return. I know, she said. He's looked like a pig in a wig for as long as I can remember. That seemed to lighten the mood more effectively. Harley could tell her dad knew she wasn't treated well by the Dursleys. Her early letters had been embarrassingly obvious on that point. But he also didn't know the details, and that was probably for the best. And it wasn't like she'd lied either. Not long after that, Jarvis called out, Castle King's side. Miss Potter, you will come to the G8 square. Harley danced around the black rook as it slid into place and came to stand beside her dad, looking out diagonally across the board. A few minutes later, he took up the thread again. I really would have thought there'd be enough clues in my letters. I told you I had a lot of tech. You didn't say what kind of tech, though, she answered. What about when I told you Jarvis was an AI? You told me he was a computer assistant. Well, I thought you might not be familiar with the technology, so I tried to keep it simple, but he's definitely an AAK. What about in my last letter before yesterday, when I told you Hedwig helped fight Loki? She gasped and looked up at him. Hedwig fought Loki. I thought you just meant she attacked one of the aliens. Oh no, she fought Loki himself, even clawed his face when he tried to throw me out the window. He threw you out the window, she said, horrified. Hey, it wasn't that bad, he said. I can fly, remember. The situation was rather more precarious than that, sir, Jarvis cut in. Not helping Jarvis, he grumbled. Anyway, it won't happen again, not like that. That was one of the safety upgrades I put in the Mark Roman 8. It was only just now sinking in with Holly that her dad had a rather dangerous job. She'd thought he'd just been in the wrong place at the wrong time in New York, but he'd actually led the charge directly. He'd fought Loki himself. He'd come out of it all right. All of the Avengers had, but how close had it been? She wasn't sure she wanted to know. Luckily, her dad moved on. Okay, what about tonight? He asked. What did you think when I said I'd be the judge of what problems I can fix by shooting them? What that? Holly said in surprise. I thought you were just being American. Her dad laughed again. Oh, I am so gonna tell Steve that one. But before too much longer, their conversation was cut short when Jarvis interrupted them, just after the White Queen captured their Deepon. Sir, I have found a likely endgame sequence, he said, and he called Rook to C3. The black rook slid up alongside the White Queen and was swiftly captured. Knight to H3, Jarvis called. The Black Knight moved into position to check the White King, and the White Queen was forced to capture it at once. Bishop to C5 was next. Again, checking the king, the White Queen was forced to interpose herself to block it, and that gave Jarvis the opening he needed. Bishop to E3, he said. The black bishop strode forward and suddenly spun its crook-tipped staff around in a savage two-handed swing, hitting the White Queen so hard that she was knocked clean off her feet. Then the bishop snagged the queen by the neck with its crook and dragged her off the board. That was disturbing to see, especially in life size, Holly's dad said as the bishop returned to its square. But that's checkmate. At once, the White King took off its crown and threw it down on the floor. It slid across the board to stop at her dad's feet. Then all the remaining pieces, white and black, bowed and stood aside, clearing the way for them to move forward. The two of them had been quite safe, thanks to Jarvis's guidance. Holly had moved just one more time, winding up directly behind her dad, while he himself had never had to move from his starting position. Well, it worked, he said, striding forward. That really shouldn't have worked, but it did. Holly just smiled as she swept her invisibility cloak back onto her shoulders, lifting the hood and vanishing from sight as she followed behind him. The door at the far side of the chessboard was not locked. It opened into another short passageway with another door at the far end. Helmet closed, her dad approached it before motioning her forward, and then he opened that door as well. A disgusting smell filled Holly's nostrils, and she gagged and held her nose. And the cause of it was visible through the doorway, lying in the middle of the floor. What the hell is that? He dad said, pushing her back a step. Holly made a retching sound and spoke in a nasally voice. Ah, I doubt dat smell. It's atral. A troll, he said. He stepped into the room cautiously, his spotlight sweeping over the huge body. It's out cold, he said. Hit in the head. Good, den we don't have to fight it, she said. He paused for a moment, surveying the scene, and said, All right, new plan. Stay close behind me in case it wakes up. Good idea, she groaned, still holding her nose. Let's hurry, you're lucky you have a mask. They crossed the room quickly, her dad holding up one arm to point his repulsor. She thought he called it at the troll. At least this is a real security measure, she pointed out. Didn't you say you and your friends beat one back on Halloween? He pointed out. Yes, Bud McGonagall said that was sheer dumb luck. They reached the other door and opened it. This one led directly into the next chamber, but Holly's dad didn't stop her from pushing through it with him to get away from the smell and the risk of the troll waking up. This proved to be a mistake when bright flames immediately sprang up behind them in the doorway, blocking their only exit. Both of them jumped back from the purple fire. There was no doubt it was real. She could feel the heat. Crap, he dad shouted while Holly yelped. Oh, that's a dirty trick. Holly, you okay? Yes, I'm fine, she said, even though she had to pat herself down to be certain her cloak hadn't caught fire. They turned around, but they met an even more unwelcome sight there. The door leading forward was blocked by another wall of magical fire that mind-bendingly seemed to be glowing black. "What the hell is that?" her dad said. "Jarvis. Unknown. The thermal signature resembles ordinary fire. The optical spectrum has no match in my database and may not conform to the laws of physics as we know them." "I was afraid you were gonna say that," he said. He looked around the room, as did Holly, but this room was small, and there was nothing in it besides a single wooden table with 7 bottles on it and a sheet of parchment. He walked over and picked it up. "Danger lies before you, while safety lies behind. 2 of us would help you, whichever you would find. One among us 7-weight is this Aridal." Holly craned her neck to see the parchment and saw a lengthy poem written out, talking about clues to different bottles. "I don't know, it could be," she said. "Jarvis, analyze." Parsing, Jarvis said. "According to the riddle, the 1st, 4th, and 5th bottles in the row contain poison. The 2nd and 6th contain nettle wine. The 3rd contains a potion that will allow the drinker to advance forward, and the 7th will allow the drinker to retreat backwards." "Oh, is it a logic puzzle?" Harley said. "Maybe that makes sense. Hermione says a lot of the greatest wizards haven't got an ounce of logic. But that's easy enough." She picked up the 3rd bottle, the smallest one, and held it up to examine it, but suddenly a gauntleted hand grasped her wrist and gently pushed it back down towards the table. "Harley," her father said, in what was probably meant to be a soothing tone. His face plate was open now. "There is no possible way that it's that easy." "What? Why not?" "Because this isn't how security works. Look, you haven't played DD. I'm guessing you haven't played Legend of Zelda either." "Other video games like that." She shook her head. "I only got to play video games when Dudley wanted someone's arse to kick." "Right. Well, dungeons like this, with puzzles to be solved, you find them in games, because in games they're designed to be solvable. But in real life, you wouldn't want it to be solvable. You want to make it so only the person with the key can get in, no matter what trick someone else has." Thatherley supposed it made sense in theory, but it didn't make sense for everything she'd seen tonight. For everything she'd heard Snape was up to even before tonight, talking with Quirrell. "But everything down here has worked up till now," she said. "What's all this then?" "Roman too don't know," he admitted. "I'd say it's a trap, but it's way too obvious to be one." "Is it?" she said. "Of course it is." "Why wouldn't it?" he said, but then he stopped cold, his eyes wide. "Oh, because other wizards don't play those kinds of games either. Whoever set this up might have thought it would work as a trap, and they might even be right, given who they're trapping." Harley's own eyes widened. "You think it was a trap for Snape?" she asked. "Or for Voldemort, maybe?" "Oh, no, and we fell for it. Because we didn't pay attention to the signs, because it was so damn obvious," he grumbled. "I'm sorry," she said with a tremble in her voice. "I didn't know. Hey, no, no," he said quickly. He laid a hand on her shoulder and she looked up at him. "This isn't your fault. You did the best you could. I blame whoever set up this mess, but I can worry about them later. Right now, we have to figure out how to get out of here." "Well," she ventured. "If it was meant to be solvable after all, maybe the riddle will work." He shook his head. "That's a separate problem," he said. "The riddle's about potions. It must be Snape's puzzle, right?" Harley thought for a minute. They'd seen Hagrid, Sprout, Flitwick, McGonagall, and she supposed Quirrell. Nothing else made sense with the troll. Yes, it must be. Snape, who's working for Voldemort, her heart sank. Wellies, double trap. You think he lied in the riddle? At minimum. Once again, the smart thing to do would be to make them all poison and keep the real potion in his pocket. Holly bit her lip nervously and looked around the room. Purple fire, black fire, potions, Iron Man. There wasn't much to work with, and they were so close now. There was only one more protection that they had to get through. Dumbledore, she whispered in realization. Dumbledore's protection must be after this. The troll must be quarrelsome, not sure how, honestly. He ran away from the one on Halloween, but Dumbledore would surely have something better than that. He'd be able to see if Snape was telling the truth in the riddle. "But there's no guarantee he did that," her dad countered. And even if he did, Snape could have mixed up the bottles or replaced them tonight. Holly sighed and looked down at her feet. He was right. They couldn't trust anything Snape did right now. But if we can't trust the potions, then we can't go back either, she said. Unless, do you have a way to figure out what's in the bottles? Her dad paused for a minute, but he answered, maybe. He flipped his face plate down. Jarvis, spectrograph. He picked up the first bottle in the line, unstoppered it, and looked inside. A small laser seemed to shoot out of one of the suit's eyes and into the bottle. It rapidly swept through the rainbow from violet to red, then vanished. I detect high concentrations of toxic alkaloids, sir, Jarvis said. Poison, then, her dad confirmed. He set it down and repeated the procedure with the second bottle. I do not have an exact chemical profile for nettle wine on file, said Jarvis. However, I detect a mild alcoholic beverage and no obvious poisons. The third bottle was different. No match in my database, sir. It appears to contain a large suite of organic compounds, but I cannot identify most of them as either helpful or harmful. That sounds like a potion, Harley said. Her dad nodded, but kept going. Assuming the forward and backward potions were the same, all 7 bottles were exactly what the riddle said they were. But even after seeing that, he wasn't convinced. I don't like it, he said. Snape still could have messed with just those 2. Well, he wasn't expecting to be followed, was he? Harley suggested. Maybe not, but I still only want to use them as a last resort. Then what do we do? She asked worriedly. Give me a minute. I'll think of something. Come on, I can solve this, he said more quietly, seemingly to himself. He looked around the room again, but there still wasn't much to work with. Purple fire, black fire, potions, Harley. Okay, how about this, he said after a minute. He approached the black fire and extended his left arm toward it slowly, just short of touching the flames. Dad, careful, Harley said. He quickly swept his hand through the flames and back out again. Harley let out a small squeak. Jarvis spoke up immediately. It appears to be within the normal parameters for mundane fire, sir, after making several allowances. I believe if you take it at a run, you can pass through safely. Dad, Harley said, that's magical fire. If it did something other than burning, well, it seems safe enough for me, he said. It'll have to do. He approached her, but he hesitated. Then he did something he hadn't done all night. The entire front of the suit opened all at once, and he stepped out of it. Tony Stark looked normal underneath the armor. His hair was short and combed, and he was wearing jeans and a t-shirt that might have been for a rock band, and maybe some kind of vest underneath it. For Harley, not having connected his face with his famous name before, he might have been any man on the street. He wasn't even that tall. She stared with wide eyes as he approached her again, leaned down closer to eye level, and laid a hand on her shoulder. Listen, Harley, he said quietly. You said there's only one protection left on the Philosopher's Stone left. Dumbledore's, she nodded, unable to speak. Then that means Snape and the Philosopher's Stone will both be in the next room. I guess so. And Voldemort, he asked. He was still pronouncing the final t. Roman 2 don't know. He might be. Oh, and it's Voldemort, it's French, she corrected in a mad fit. Her dad stared at her, and she half laughed at the absurdity when it registered. Okay, priorities, but fine, he said. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to run in there, take Snape down, and make him tell me the real answer to the potions. I want you to stay here. Keep your cloak on. Keep quiet. And wait beside the doorway on the left side there. That's where someone will be least likely to look if they slip out. If you can, try to listen for me. If it goes wrong, we'll go to Plan B. I'll come back out and try to get you out through the purple fire using the suit. If it goes really wrong and I don't come back out, Harley let out a squeak of horror. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. I'm gonna come back, he insisted. But if it goes really wrong, that's when you might need to take your chances with the potion, the last one in the line. Do you have all that? She nodded again, blinking back tears. Then he pulled her into a hug, and she broke down completely. She wasn't sure how long she was crying like that. It might have been only a couple of minutes, but it felt like it took ages to collect herself. She barely registered the hard disc in the middle of his chest, right where the blue light had been on his suit. Finally, her dad pulled away, stepping back towards the suit. "Okay, I have to go," he said. "I love you, Holly." "I love you too, Dad," she said faintly. He stepped backwards into the suit, but it didn't close back up. He frowned and did something with the controls in one of the gauntlets, but it still didn't move. He sighed. "And I just opened the Faraday cage." Harley was about to offer to help, but he did something with his feet. He pressed his toe into some kind of control and kicked forward, and there was a mechanical clanking as the boot closed up around his leg. First one leg, then the other. Some kind of lever in the wrist made each gauntlet close up. Then he pulled the breastplate back onto his chest, and suddenly the suit hummed to life again, closing the rest of the way and fully lighting up. "And that's where I added the manual controls," he said triumphantly. He waited for her to put her invisibility cloak back on. Then he took a few steps back and started into a run, barreling through the black fire. Harley tiptoed around and pressed herself against the wall on the left side of the doorway, as close as she could safely stand to the heat of the flames. She craned her ears for what was happening in the next room. It was hard to hear over the crackling fire, but her father's electronic voice came through. "Professor Snape, I presume." But what she heard next made her eyes grow wide with horror. That wasn't Snape's voice at all. It was Quirrell. Chapter 116, 15 June, The Philosopher's Stone, Cont. "Professor Snape, I presume," Tony said as he surveyed the scene. At a glance, it was another chamber, sizable, but mostly empty. The only things of note were a large, antique upright mirror and a man who was staring into it. No Voldemort that he could see. The man was thin, but with little else to distinguish him from the back aside from a bright purple turban. And the one other odd thing, Tony could see even from this angle that his skin tone was too pale to be from a culture where that headgear was commonplace. "Snape," the man said mockingly, and he started to turn around. He was an Helthalithin, Tony saw now, but his eyes burned with malice. "Where did you?" he stopped, and what had been a taunting smile dropped off his face, replaced with confusion and disbelief. "Yow, your errand man," he said. "That's me," Tony replied. "And you're Snape," the smirk returned. "Snape, and where did you hear that?" he said. Tony drew a sharp breath. Was this Snape? He suddenly felt very annoyed with himself that he hadn't thought to ask Harley what Snape looked like. Neither of them had expected anyone else to be down here. Don't tip him off, he thought. "A little birdie told me," he said. The man narrowed his eyes at him, and Tony was sure he'd made a mistake. "A little student, you mean?" he said. "Dumbledore wouldn't leave you that ignorant, but to a student, well, Severus does seem the type, doesn't he, swooping around like an overgrown bat. Next to him, who would suspect P.P. poor, since stuttering P-Professor Quirrell?" "Quirrell," Tony said. Thankfully, Jarvis was already ahead of him and highlighted all of the information available about him on the HUD, both the mentions in Harley's letters and their conversation a few minutes ago. The defense against the dark arts teacher. "Then you've heard of me, at least," he said. Tony's brilliant mind raced, but he didn't know where to go with it. This was Quirrell. The man Harley said stuttered all the time and was scared of his own shadow, except it looked like it was an act. Did Harley have it woeful teachers this year? She'd still seen Snape trying to kill her, no, he remembered. Snape had attacked her, with magic that she claimed wasn't likely to be lethal, when he had recently had an unrelated grievance against her. Bad, but not magic, terrorist bad. And Quirrell, if it was an active, he was competent at magic, competent at handling threats, the troll. Tony made the connection. "You lit the troll into the castle on Halloween." "Oh, bravo," Quirrell said as mockingly as ever. "They said you were intelligent. Yes, I have a special gift for trolls. You must have seen what I did to the one in the chamber back there. Unfortunately, the one I let in then wasn't enough. Snape already suspected me, and he went to the third floor to head me off. Then that blasted three-headed dog didn't even bite his leg off properly, and meanwhile my trollso filled to beat Potter to death." Tony tensed, and he just barely held back from charging forward and blasting him. He still needed more information. First interrogate, then eviscerate, he thought. So Snape was never involved at all, he said. He was trying to stop you. Of course he was, Quirrell scoffed. He may act the part, but those of us who pay attention know he's too far up Dumbledore's arse to work against him. He's been trying to frighten me away from my mission all year, he chuckled darkly. But that just shows how poorly I were informed. For a moment, I was worried Dumbledore had sent you. He loves surprises like that. But no, you were clearly just sent here by a scared student. Are you secretly the Granger girl's father? It would explain her brains. You can leave the kids out of this, Tony said. I know why you're here. You want the Philosopher's Stone for your boss, but you're not getting it. Quirrell raised a magic wand, much like Harley and Hermione had. Tony was faster. He shot a repulsor blast at Quirrell. Except it turned out Quirrell was even faster, just barely. He made a slashing motion with his wand, and the repulsor blast exploded against an invisible force field 2 feet in front of him. Then he made a stabbing motion, and a bolt of light shot out of his wand at Tony. Tony had no idea what that magic spell did, but he definitely didn't want to find out how it affected his tech. He lunged to the side, using another repulsor blast to help push him out of the spell's path, and it splashed against the wall. The fight continued from there. Tony tried more repulsor blasts, but Quirrell blocked them. Quirrell shot back, but Tony kept dodging. A couple of the spells seemed to clip his suit and scramble the systems, but he didn't feel any ill effects directly. He tried aiming at the floor to Quirrell's side to trip him up, but Quirrell didn't lose his footing. He tried shooting the mirror. He didn't know what it was for, but the mirror might be the key to get to the Philosopher's Stone. But the blast fizzled against the mirror. It looked like it was protected the same way as the door with the flying keys. Suddenly, there was another voice in the room. Quit wasting time. He's only a muggle. Make him hold still and finish him. At once, Quirrell got more creative. He conjured ropes that moved on their own, flying at him. Tony dodged those two, but they pursued him, and between Theme and Quirrell's curses, he didn't have enough room to escape. The ropes wrapped around his legs, pinning him in place. They were still ordinary ropes, of course. It took only a moment to break them, but a moment was all that Quirrell needed. He waved his wand in a zigzag motion and shouted, Avada Kedavra. There was a flash of green and the sound of a child screaming, Dad! But Tony didn't have time to react before he was slammed into the wall. Harley watched in horror as her dad and Quirrell fought each other, and Quirrell was holding his own. Quirrell, who had fainted at a troll attacking the school, or she'd thought he had. She crouched down, making herself smaller, ready to bolt if she found herself in the line of fire. Harley may have been reckless, but she wasn't stupid. She stood in the doorway, invisible, just in front of the black flames, ready to run for it if things got too hot. Or she supposed, if the anti-cursed fire potion started to wear off. She'd only wanted to see well, not entirely. Against Quirrell, if Hare hadn't been acting, maybe she could help. But now she was just staying alert to ensure she didn't get herself killed. She thought she heard another voice telling Quirrell to stop wasting time, but a moment later Quirrell shouted, Avada Kedavra, and she saw the green light. That green light, the green light that had haunted her dreams for longer than she could remember. Harley couldn't help it. Without thinking, she screamed out, Dad! But there was no time for him to react. The curse exploded against his chest, throwing the Iron Man's suit back into the stone wall, where it slumped to the floor. Quirrell had heard her scream. He looked around for the source, but she was already moving without thinking. Praying he wouldn't hear her under her cloak, Harley tiptoed as fast as she dared to her father's side. The entire breastplate of the suit was blasted open, exposing the smoking machinery inside. The blue light in the middle of his chest was flickering again. Please don't be dead, she pleaded silently. Please don't be dead. He can't be dead. He just can't. He was moving. Fumbling, as if he was struggling to lift his gauntlets, he reached up and fiddled with something on his helmet, and his faceplate fell away, revealing a pained, out-of-breath expression. He immediately began working on another armor plate. Harley knelt down beside him. Dad, she whispered as quietly as she could. He jolted and briefly glanced in her direction, but he caught himself and looked back at Quirrell. Harley, what are you doing? He whispered back through clenched teeth. I'm sorry. I had to warn you, she whispered through her tears. What do I do? She gripped the edge of his forearm plate through her cloak, hoping to find the lever he'd used earlier. Run! Just go. Suit's dead, her dad said. He started working with his other hand more frantically on the shoulder plate. Harley kept trying to find the wrist lever, but Quirrell must have noticed the motion because behind her she heard a voice hiss. There. Invisible. Her dad raised a gauntlet, despite his suit being dead, and Harley turned to look, but she had no time to move. Quirrell ran right at her. He waved his hand around clumsily, smacking roughly against the back of her head, and then he grasped her invisibility cloak and yanked it off of her, tossing it to the side. Harley stared up in horror as he looked her directly in the eyes. Pater, Quirrell said excitedly. Sireth child who sent the Muggles' mightiest hero to me, what a surprise. Harley, run, her dad grunted, but there was nowhere for her to run. Quirrell was practically on top of her. You're perfect. Mother had secrets of her own, did she? Quirrell said. But look now. See how far your champion has fallen. Now, even the great and powerful Avengers will know Thapmagis's might. Harley didn't know what to do. The only thing she could think of was to keep him talking. For what she didn't know, but she saw her dad was still struggling with his suit. He was trying to work faster, stripping off his armor piece by piece, but it wasn't enough. You know about the Avengers? She asked. Of course I know, girl. I used to teach Muggle studies. I read all about the adventures of Iron Man. My master, he grew more uncertain. My master thought it was not useful. I believed it would help to remain informed, but I see now he was right. What can a mere Muggle do to me when I have Lord Voldemort on my side? He turned back around. Now wait quietly, Potter. I need to examine this interesting mirror, he said as he approached it. Harley, get out, her dad whispered. I think not, said Quirrell. He snapped his fingers. Ropes sprang out of thin air and wrapped themselves tightly around Harley. Stay, Potter. You're too nosy to live. Damn it, her father said more loudly. There was a clank of metal behind her as he removed another piece of his suit. Harley didn't move. Have to keep him talking, she thought. Have to keep him distracted from the mirror. For it was the mirror of Erist, and there was no other explanation. It must be the key to the Philosopher's Stone. And also, she gradually realized, she wanted answers. Snape wasn't behind this. Snape must have been trying to threaten Quirrell back to Dumbledore's side in the forest. He seemed to have Quirrell cowed in the classroom the other day, but maybe that was an act. But Snape, if Snape was working for Dumbledore, why did he try to kill me at the Quidditch match? She demanded. Quirrell's reflection glanced at her in the mirror. No, number Itry to kill you, he said. You, her dad shouted between grunts, but Quirrell ignored him. Your friend Miss Granger accidentally knocked me over as she rushed to set fire to Snape. She broke my eye contact with you. Another few seconds and I'd have got you off that broom, even with Snape muttering his little counter-curse. Snape was trying to save me. Of course, said Quirrell coolly. Why do you think he wanted to referee your next match? He was trying to make sure I didn't do it again. Funny, really needn't have bothered. I couldn't do anything with Dumbledore watching. It wouldn't have worked anyway. My teammates would have caught me, she told him. Perhaps not, Quirrell said dismissively, focusing his attention back on the mirror, waving his wand over it. She needed more time. But Snape always seemed to hate me so much, she said. Oh, he does, said Quirrell casually. Heavens, yes. He was at Hogwarts with your father, didn't you know? They loathed each other, but he never wanted Yauded. It was no good. He didn't look like he was going to be distracted. I don't understand, he muttered to himself. I can see the stone. I'm presenting it to my master. But where is it? Is it inside the mirror? Should I break it? And then, to Harley's horror, another voice spoke. She hadn't been mistaken before. It was a high, cold voice that seemed to come from Quirrell himself. Use the girloose the girl, Quirrell rounded on Harley. Yes, Potter, come here. Now, He clapped his hands once, and the ropes binding Holly fell off. Holly got slowly to her feet. "Holly, run!" her dad called, but Quirrell still had his wand raised, like a snake ready to strike. Holly walked toward him, still desperately searching for a plan, some other way to distract him. Her mind was racing. "What I want more than anything else in the world right now is to find the stone before Quirrell does," she thought. "So if I look in the mirror, I should see where it's hidden. So I must look in the mirror, but I must lie and say it's somewhere else." She tried to think of what a good lie would be. There wasn't anywhere else in the chamber to hide the stone. A hidden door, maybe. "Come here," Quirrell repeated. "Look in the mirror and tell me what you see." Suddenly, a wild thought struck her. She remembered what her dad had said. The smart thing to do would be to keep it in his pocket. Quirrell moved close behind her. Harley breathed in the funny smell that seemed to come from his turban. She closed her eyes, stepped in front of the mirror, and opened them again. She saw her reflection, pale and scared-looking at first. But a moment later, the reflection smiled at her. It put its hand into its pocket and pulled out a blood-red stone. It winked and put the stone back in its pocket, and as it did so, Holly felt something heavy drop into her real pocket, thankfully not the one with the magnet, and she suddenly realized she had no idea what to do next. Somehow, impossibly, she had got the philosopher's stone, but what could she do with it? There was nowhere to run, and she still had to help her dad get out. "Well," said Quirrell impatiently. "What do you see?" Harley screwed up her courage once more. "Roman 2 see Dumbledore giving me the stone," she said. "He's saying it was in his pocket the whole time." Quirrell cursed again and shoved her aside. "No," he shouted, looking frantically into the mirror again. "Where is it?" Was it a trick? She tried to back away, but she'd barely got 5 paces when the high voice spoke again. She leashed lies. Quirrell whirled around to face her. "Potter, tell the truth. What did you see? Did you find the stone?" "He's got me," she thought. Then Holly did the only other thing she could think of, no matter how futile it was. She stood between Quirrell and her dad and squared up against him, raising her wand. Quirrell laughed. "Really, now?" He didn't even raise his wand in return, but she had to try. "Flipendo," she cried, and a bolt of light flew from her wand, but Quirrell deflected it into the wall with a mere flick of his wrist. He took a step forward, and she tried to back up. "Incendio," she tried again with the same result. "Defindo, verdimilius." "Fumos," each time. Quirrell inched closer, unhurried but inexorable, and each time she had no more success in casting a spell at him. After he dissolved her attempt at a smokescreen with another wave of his hand, she tried, Wingardium, but Quirrell snapped his fingers, and her wand flew clean out of her hand and clattered in the corner of the room. "Don't be foolish, girl," he said. "I taught you everything you know. Now tell me the truth. Let me speak to her face to face," the high voice said. Quirrell stopped and flinched back just for a moment. "Master, you are not strong enough," he said. "I have strength enough for this." Harley stared in growing terror as Quirrell, looking suddenly nervous himself, reached up and began to unwrap his turban. It fell away even as he turned on the spot, and Harley would have screamed at what she saw, but she couldn't make a sound. Where there should have been a back to Quirrell's head, there was another face, the most terrible face Harley had ever seen. It was chalk white with glaring red eyes and slits for nostrils, like a snake. "Oh, that's just wrong," she heard her dad say from somewhere behind her. "Harley Potter," the face whispered. "We meet again." "Voldemort," she said. She felt rooted to the spot. She racked her brain for any way to get herself, her father, and the stone out of the chamber in one piece, but she had nothing. She couldn't imagine Quirrell would let her father live even if she cooperated, and Voldemort would still get the stone. The best she could do was stall and hope her dad could get the rest of the way out of his suit on his own. But the black fire was still blocking the exit. He couldn't leave. Could he fight without the suit? And meanwhile, Voldemort was still staring her down. "Yes, you see what I have become," he said. He spoke slowly, as if he didn't have enough breath to form words properly. "Mere shadow and vapory have form only when I can share another's, But there have always been those willing to let me into their hearts, and mine's unicorn blood has strengthened me. These past weeks you saw faithful Quirrell drinking it for me in the forest, and once I have the elixir of life, I will be able to create a body of my own. Don't you give me that stone in your pocket. The feeling surged back into Harley's legs. She stumbled backward. Don't be a fool, snarled the face. Better save your own life and join me, or you'll meet the same end as your parents. They died begging me for mercy. Liar, Harley shouted suddenly. Quirrell was walking backward at her so that Voldemort could still see her. The evil face was now smiling. How touching, it hissed. I always value bravery, eyes girl. Your parents were brave, killed your father first, and he put up a courageous fight, but your mother needn't have. Deech was trying to protect Yauno. Give me the stone, unless you want her to have died in vain. Never. Seize her, Voldemort screamed. Quirrell lunged forward or backward. Ratharand grabbed her by the wrist in a grip that felt like iron despite his frail appearance. At once, a razor-sharp pain seared across Harley's scar. It felt like a cleaver trying to crack her head open. She screamed, struggling with all her might, and to her surprise, Quirrell let go. The pain in her head lessened, but Quirrell had bent double, that was, away from her, groaning in pain. Even as she watched, his fingers seemed to blister. Master, I cannot hold her. My hands, Quirrell cried. Then kill her, fool, and be done, screeched Voldemort. Quirrell raised his wand backwards over his shoulder to perform a deadly curse, pointing it directly where Voldemort was looking directly at Harley. But at that moment, there was a loud crackling sound behind her and a whiff of smoke, and suddenly a blast of energy slammed into Voldemort's face, launching Quirrell's body across the room, where he fell and lay still. Harley turned in shock, and there she saw Tony Stark with a look of fury on his face, still sitting against the wall. His armor was peeled off to his waist now, lying in pieces around him, except for his right arm. He had the gauntlet raised toward Quirrell, the yellow light in the palm glowing brightly. And his left hand, she saw, he had removed the gauntlet, and with burns on his fingers she could see from across the room, he was touching two exposed, sparking wires to the circle of light in his chest. Hands off my daughter, he snarled, and then he let his arms drop. Harley stared in shock for a moment before it fully registered. Dad, she cried and rushed to his side again. He sat there limp, eyes closed and breathing hard, but slowly he turned and looked at her again. Harley, what were you doing? He said in a pained voice. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, she said as tears started to fall. I was only watching from the doorway, but then I saw. How did you? He said, wincing in pain. The potion, she said. When I heard it wasn't Snape after all, I thought his riddle must be true. Shouldn't have let him know you were there. I'm sorry, she sobbed again. I couldn't help it. I saw that light, and I had to warn you. He shook his head, but she persisted. I had to. I've been having nightmares about that green light for the past 10 years. His eyes widened in understanding, and he slumped back, his head bumping against the wall. Oh, God, he groaned. I didn't know you, he trailed off, as if not sure what to say. What happened? Harley asked nervously. Suits fried, he groaned. He tried to shift his weight, but he could barely move his legs. Whatever that spell was, everything stopped. No restart, nothing. I was lucky I could still close a circuit with the repulsor and that the arc reactor wasn't fried, too. Harley looked down at his chest. His shirt was singed around the flickering circle of blue light, letting it show more clearly as a piece of machinery, and she suddenly realized how odd it looked, sitting almost flush with his skin. Is that inside you? She said. Yeah, he said. Leftover present from my time in Afghanistan. The injury couldn't be fully repaired. It's, well, basically, it's a very expensive pacemaker. A pacemaker. It took a moment to register, but when it did, she gasped in horror. You have a pacemaker and you came to Hogwarts, she squealed. But electronics technology, what if it stopped working? Had to risk it. That's what the magnet's for, emergency backup. The magnet, the magnet. She fumbled in her pockets for the super magnet he'd given her. She held it out to him. Do you need it now? He looked down at the flickering arc reactor. Not yet, he said. Wait till I get the rest of the suit off. He looked across the chamber. Two-Face over there still out cold. Holly looked too. Quirrell hadn't moved. I think so, she said, though she wasn't foolish enough to approach him. All right, might have to take the chance, her dad said. He reached up with his left hand to try to unlatch the gauntlet from his right arm. Gah! He flinched back, his fingers twisting into claws. Up close, Holly could see they were covered in blisters and scorch marks, electrical burns. At once, she scampered around to his other side and dug her fingers under the panel where he'd been reaching. How do I do this? There's a manual release, he groaned. There should be a button just inside the highest part. She felt around and found the button. There was a series of clicks, and the upper part of the suit's arm popped open. Good, he said. Now at the elbow, she was just trying to find the next release when the black flames in the doorway suddenly went out, and they heard running footsteps. Her dad raised his arm again, but he needn't have bothered. A moment later, Albus Dumbledore rushed into the room. He looked around the room and spotted them at once. Holly, he said, his voice filled with relief. Thank God, and he stopped short. Is that Iron Man? He asked. Holly looked up at him with her tear-stained face. Professor, please, you have to help him, she said. Oh, of course, my dear, Dumbledore said, coming around to crouch by his other side. But what in Merlin's name is Van Mandoing at Hogwarts? He's my dad.